Hey, I'm Mr. Ghost. If you love true horror stories, consider subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. The stories you'll hear are shared by our audience from Reddit, and to keep their original essence, I read them exactly as they were written. Before we begin, let me know in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? Also, check the timestamps in the comments for story titles and easy navigation. Now, let's dive into the darkness. I used to be followed around by this creature. Now, it stopped, but I'm afraid something more sinister took its place. At first, I freaked out, for obvious reasons. I am a woman, and even if I weren't, the sensation of being followed is never good. It started when I was a teenager, and coming home from school. At first I assumed it was just some classmate that had the same route as me. Every time I turned a corner, this shadow would follow. However, every time I stopped, they would stop too. I didn't want to pay attention too much, because I thought it was a stalker or something. But I started getting so freaked out that I'd periodically stop and look back. And no one was there, even when there was no possible place where they could have hidden. I told my family and friends, and even if I was walking along with them, I'd still feel followed, and that went on for years and years. Obviously, after I moved out to a city 1,000 miles away, I realized it had to be all in my head. I felt followed even in my own house, all the time. One night I had the brilliant idea to open my front camera and check behind me. That's when I first saw the creature, and it wasn't pretty. I remember that moment vividly, but after that, everything was a blur. I just know therapists and priests couldn't help me, and I had to accept his permanent guest in my life. Besides, it's not like it did anything. Just watched. Last month I had to wake up really early for a flight. But even though I was incredibly tired, I could still make out something was wrong. I don't know how. The air felt different. I got on the plane and, the whole trip, the watching sensation had stopped. It was almost imperceptible, but I knew, just like one of your ears is clogged because your balance is a little off. I thought the creature hadn't managed to get on the plane with me, but even when I returned back home, the guest would not make an appearance anymore. I stopped hearing its footsteps and seeing it with my front camera. I stopped feeling watched, for the first time in 15 years. Now, some would have been relieved, happy, even. I wasn't. You know how silence doesn't always have to be comforting. I kept associating this with the calm before the storm. Let me describe it to you. You're walking through a dense forest, loud and full of life. What do you do when the noise stops? When suddenly everything is dead silent? Do you feel relief? I didn't. Well, the watching sensation started again 3 days ago, only this time it was more prominent than ever. I didn't necessarily feel relieved, just back to my normal state of ignoring whatever thing had chosen me as its show. I didn't think it would hurt me. I'd done this for over 15 years. Why start now? I should have moved on from these thoughts. And yet, well, as I said, the sensation was more prominent. And so were the footsteps I'd hear behind me, and the breathing. I was watching this show on my laptop, and it had a dark scene, the ones where you can see your own reflection in the screen. I stared at my face, and at the pale silhouette of my dresser behind me, waiting for the frame to get lit up again so I could finally make out what was happening. I spun around a bit in my chair. At my desk, in the living room, that had no dresser. I paused the show and stared at the white silhouette, then took out my front camera trying to look behind me. The creature wasn't there anymore. At least, not all of it. Just the skin. Stretched out, the face propped, eyes wide open, like some coat too tight to fit a much larger body, as if something was wearing its skin, with bloodshot eyes, never blinking, fixated on the camera. It had seen I was looking at it, so it looked back, then smiled. My instinct was to take a picture, so I did, but it just showed me and nothing behind. I turned around, only to be greeted by the empty room. Something was wrong. I had forgotten to breathe, and my limbs were numb from fear. Trembling, I stood up and ran, tripping and hitting my knee on the coffee table. I ran like crazy upstairs, to my bedroom, and slammed the door shut. For the last 3 days, I've only walked around the house with my back against a wall, never leaving any space for anyone, or anything, to follow me anywhere, because if I know one thing, it's that it always stays behind me. Problem is, I can keep up with this lifestyle forever, and I think it's waiting for me to turn my back on it. I've been watched and followed for 15 years, and yet I have never been so terrified until now. I was camping with my friends. Some of us remember what happened that night differently. The fire crackled softly as we sat in a circle, the darkness of the forest pressing in around us. I glanced at my friends, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. It was our annual camping trip, a tradition we had kept since high school. This year, we had chosen a remote spot deep in the woods, far from the nearest town. Everything had been going smoothly until that night. "Do you guys remember what happened?" Sarah asked, her voice tinged with unease. I frowned, trying to piece together the fragmented memories. I remembered the fire, the laughter, and the drinking. But after that, things got hazy. "We were telling ghost stories, right?" I said, hoping someone could fill in the blanks. "Yeah," Mark replied, but he didn't sound sure. "We were, but then, I don't know. It's like I blacked out or something." Tom, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "I remember," he said, his voice low. "There was something in the woods." My heart skipped a beat, a cold wave of dread washing over me. Flashes of the night surged back into my mind, shadowy figures slipping between the ancient trees, their movements fluid and unnatural. The wind carried faint, haunting whispers that seemed to come from all directions, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. An overwhelming sense of dread had settled over me like a suffocating shroud, making it hard to breathe. Each memory felt surreal, like fragments of a terrible dream that couldn't possibly be real. Yet the fear they evoked was all too tangible. "What did we see?" I asked, my mouth dry. Tom's eyes darted to the dark woods surrounding us. I know the feeling it gave me. Sarah shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. I thought it was just a nightmare. A nightmare we all had in unison. "I don't think so," Tom insisted, his voice trembling. A silence fell over us, the only sounds the crackling fire and the distant rustling of leaves. The fear in our eyes was unmistakable, but there was something else, confusion, like our memories were fragmented pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. "Wait," Mark said suddenly. "Didn't we run?" I remember running through the woods, trying to get away. "I remember that too," I said. The memory surfacing, branches whipped against my face, the ground uneven beneath my feet, the sensation of being chased. "But we didn't all run," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "Some of us stayed behind." A cold chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I saw you, Jack. You were standing by the fire, talking to it, like you were in a trance." "That's not possible," I said, shaking my head. "I was with you guys. We all ran together." Tom's face went pale. "No, she's right. I remember that too. You were saying something to it." Panic surged through me. "But that's not what happened," I insisted. "I was with you guys." "Then how do we all remember it differently?" Mark asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We sat in stunned silence, the fire casting eerie shadows around us. I could feel the weight of the conflicting memories pressing down on me, each one as real as the other but impossible to reconcile. Suddenly, a twig snapped in the darkness. We all froze, our eyes darting to the edge of the firelight. A figure stood just beyond the reach of the flames, tall and unnaturally thin. The details were obscured by the shadows, but there was something familiar about its posture, its presence. "It's back," Tom whispered, his voice trembling. Who's back?" Sarah responded. "I don't know," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. Sarah clutched my arm. "We need to leave, now." Before we could react, the figure emerged from the shadows and stepped into the flickering light of the fire, revealing a face that sent a chill down my spine. It was me, or at least, it looked like me. But there was something off, something inherently wrong about the way it moved and the expression etched on its features. Its eyes, once mirrors of my own, now glinted with an unsettling darkness. Devoid of any trace of humanity, they locked onto mine with a predatory intensity, and a sickening smile spread across its lips, a twisted, malevolent grin that sent a shiver down my spine. The resemblance was uncanny, Yet there was an undeniable aura of menace emanating from this doppelganger, as if it were a distorted reflection of my worst fears and darkest desires come to life. "Some of us remember," it said, its voice a chilling echo of my own. "Some of us don't." My friend screamed, the sound piercing the night, but I couldn't move, couldn't speak. The creature lunged forward, and the world went black. When I opened my eyes, I was back by the fire. My friends were gone, the forest eerily silent. The memories of what happened, of what was real, swirled in my mind, indistinguishable from each other. I was alone, but I could feel eyes watching me from the darkness. As I stood up, disoriented, I saw movement at the edge of the clearing. My friends emerged from the shadows, looking as confused and terrified as I felt. "What happened?" Mark asked, his voice shaky. We quickly gathered our things, the sense of urgency palpable. As we packed up, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, watching us, waiting. We navigated through the dense woods, the path a barely discernible ribbon in the dim light of dawn. The forest seemed alive, closing in around us with an oppressive, almost sentient presence. Tall, gnarled trees whispered secrets we couldn't understand, their leaves rustling with a language of their own. Every snap of a twig underfoot, every rustle of leaves overhead, sent jolts of panic through us, our nerves frayed and on edge. The sky slowly lightened, casting a ghostly pallor over the landscape, and our hearts leaped with relief as we finally glimpsed the edge of the woods. The sight of our cars, silent and waiting like sentinels, brought a rush of hope. We didn't waste a moment, throwing our gear into the trunks with frantic, fumbling hands, our only thought to put as much distance between us and that cursed campsite as possible. The forest's grip seemed to loosen as we sped away, but the unease clung to us, a shadow of the night we couldn't escape. As we drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a moment, I saw the tall figure standing at the edge of the woods, watching us with an unnerving stillness. Then it was gone, swallowed by the shadows. We didn't speak much on the drive back. The silence was heavy, each of us lost in our thoughts. When we finally parted ways, promising to keep in touch, I knew things would never be the same. That night, as I lay in bed, the events of the past 2 days replayed in my mind. Just as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard a faint knock at my window. My heart pounded as I turned to look, and there, standing outside, was the doppelganger, its expression blank, its eyes empty. It smiled, a twisted reflection of my own face, and mouthed the words some of us remember. What did I stumble upon? What does it want from me? I bolted upright, my heart racing as I backed away from the window. The doppelganger's eyes followed my every movement, its smile widening in a grotesque parody of my own. Trembling, I reached for my phone and dialed Sarah's number, my fingers fumbling over the keys. She picked up after the third ring, her voice groggy and confused. "Jack? What's going on? It's the middle of the night." "It's here," I whispered, my voice shaking. "It's right outside my window, the doppelganger." There was a brief pause, and then Sarah's voice came back, more alert and panicked. "What? Are you sure? Did you call the police?" "I don't think the police can help with this," I replied, glancing back at the window. The figure was gone, leaving only the empty night behind. "I think it wants something from us." Before Sarah could respond, a loud crash came from the living room. My heart skipped a beat, and I slowly crept towards the sound, the phone still pressed to my ear. "Sarah, stay on the line. Something's in my house." I heard her gasp on the other end. "Jack, be careful." I edged towards the living room, every shadow seeming to writhe and twist with malevolent intent. As I rounded the corner, I saw the front door swinging open, the lock splintered and broken, my breath caught in my throat. "It's inside," I whispered. Then, a wave of dizziness hit me hard, twisting my whole world. I couldn't hold the phone in my hand anymore. Desperate to grab onto something, I collapsed, and my vision grew dark. I was back in the forest, the fire crackling softly beside me. My friends were there, their faces lit by the flickering flames, but something was different. They looked at me with a mixture of fear and suspicion. "Jack, are you okay?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. I nodded slowly, trying to piece together what had happened. "I think so. What about you guys?" "We're fine," Mark replied, his eyes darting to the shadows around us. "But we need to get out of here. Now." As we hurriedly packed up our things, a sense of déjà vu washed over me. The events of the night seemed to loop in my mind, each memory bleeding into the next. We stumbled through the dark woods, the path seeming to twist and change beneath our feet. When we finally reached the edge of the forest, our cars were waiting. Just as before, we piled in, desperate to escape. But as we sped away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. In the rearview mirror, I saw them again, our doppelgangers, standing at the edge of the woods, watching us with those cold, empty eyes. They smiled, their expressions filled with a promise of return. We didn't speak much on the drive back. The silence was heavy, each of us lost in our thoughts, haunted by the events of the night. When we finally parted ways, I knew things would never be the same. Then the twisted dream changed to my bedroom, watching my double at the window. The doppelganger tilted its head, the smile never faltering. "We want you to remember," it whispered, the sound slipping through the glass like a cold breeze. "Remember what you saw, what you did." The words sent a shiver down my spine. "I don't understand. What did we do?" It placed a hand against the window, and the glass began to frost over, intricate patterns of ice spreading out from its touch. "You will," it said, "soon." The frost on the window thickened, and through the icy veil, I saw other figures emerging from the darkness. They were all there: Sarah, Mark, Tom, each one accompanied by their doppelganger. They surrounded my house, their faces eerily calm, their eyes locked onto mine. Panic surged through me, and I grabbed my phone, dialing Mark's number this time. It rang and rang, but there was no answer. Desperate, I tried Tom next, but the result was the same. My friends were unreachable, and I was alone. A soft tapping came from behind me, and I spun around to see another doppelganger standing in the doorway of my bedroom. This one was different though. It was me, but not the same twisted version from outside. This one looked exactly like me, down to the clothes I was wearing. "Jack," it said, its voice a perfect echo of mine. "It's time to remember." My head spun with a torrent of memories, fragments of the night in the woods, pieces that didn't fit together, images of the fire, the shadows, the feeling of being chased, but also flashes of something else, something I had buried deep in my mind, a ritual, ancient symbols drawn in the dirt, and us, my friends and I, standing in a circle, chanting words we didn't understand. "What did we do?" I whispered, the realization dawning on me. "You called us," the doppelganger replied, its eyes boring into mine. "You brought us here, and now we are part of you." "No," I said, backing away. "That's not true. We didn't mean to." "It doesn't matter," it interrupted, stepping closer. "What matters is that we are here, and we will never leave." I tried to run, but the room seemed to twist and warp around me, the walls closing in. The last thing I saw was my own terrified face staring back at me, a mirror of my fear and regret. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in the forest, the fire crackling softly beside me. My friends were there, but something was different. They looked at me with a mixture of fear and suspicion, their eyes glinting with an unsettling darkness. "Jack, are you okay?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. I nodded slowly, trying to piece together what had happened. "I think so. What about you guys?" "We're fine," Mark replied, his eyes darting to the shadows around us. "But we need to get out of here. Now." As we hurriedly packed up our things, a sense of déjà vu washed over me. The events of the night seemed to loop in my mind, each memory bleeding into the next. We stumbled through the dark woods, the path seeming to twist and change beneath our feet. When we finally reached the edge of the forest, our cars were waiting. Just as before, we piled in, desperate to escape. But as we sped away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. In the rearview mirror, I saw them again, our doppelgangers, standing at the edge of the woods, watching us with those cold, empty eyes. They smiled, their expressions filled with a promise of return. We didn't speak much on the drive back. The silence was heavy, each of us lost in our thoughts, haunted by the events of the night. When we finally parted ways, I knew things would never be the same. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard the knock at my window again. My heart pounded as I turned to look, and there it was, the doppelganger, its expression blank, its eyes empty. It smiled, a twisted reflection of my own face, and mouthed the words, Some of us remember, and now you're one of us. The realization hit me like a cold wave. I wasn't just a target. I was becoming one of them, and as I stared into those empty eyes, I knew there was no escape from the darkness that had claimed us all. The doppelganger pressed its hand against the glass, and the frost began to spread again, intricate patterns of ice crawling across the window pane. I woke up startled and realized I'd been laying unconscious on the living room floor, my front door wide open, revealing the cold night. Suddenly, my phone buzzed on the floor, startling me. I grabbed it, seeing a text from Sarah. "Are you seeing this too?" I quickly replied, my fingers trembling. "Yes, we need to talk. Now." I had the weirdest dream, a continuous loop of us going back to the forest and running away. Her response came almost immediately. "Meet at the diner in 20 minutes. Bring Mark and Tom." I nodded to myself, feeling a sliver of hope. Maybe together we could figure out what was happening. Find a way to stop it. I grabbed my jacket and keys, casting one last glance at the window. The doppelganger was gone, but the frost remained, a chilling reminder of the nightmare that was far from over. As I stepped outside, the cold night air bit into my skin. I hurried to my car, my breath visible in the frigid air. The drive to the diner was a blur, my mind racing with fear and uncertainty. What had we unleashed, and how could we stop it? When I arrived, Sarah, Mark, and Tom were already there, their faces pale and drawn. We exchanged brief, grim nods and sat down at a corner booth, away from the few other late-night patrons. "We need to figure out what we did," Mark said, his voice urgent, "and how to undo it." Tom nodded, his eyes dark with worry. "I remember something about a ritual, symbols in the dirt chanting. We must have called them." Sarah shivered. "But how do we send them back?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "We need to retrace our steps, remember exactly what we did. Maybe we can find a way to reverse it." While we were talking, Mark kept his eyes fixated on the window behind me. I was too afraid to ask him what he was seeing. "Why would we even start this ritual?" Sarah asked. As we huddled together in the dimly lit diner, the memories of that fateful night came rushing back, sharp and vivid. "We did it to bring someone back," I began, my voice barely above a whisper. My friends leaned in closer, the tension palpable. "We found that old book in the abandoned cabin, the one with the ritual to resurrect the dead. We were desperate. The ritual seemed like our only hope. We drew the symbols in the dirt, chanted the incantations under the full moon, and waited." Sarah's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. "Wait, are you saying we—" "Yes," I interrupted, nodding. "We performed a resurrection ritual, but something went wrong. We didn't just bring one soul back. We opened a door." Tom's face paled, his hands shaking. "What door, Jack? What did we do?" I took a deep breath, the weight of the truth pressing down on me. "We brought back others, dark, twisted echoes of ourselves, and now they're haunting us as doppelgangers." A tense silence fell over the table, each of us grappling with the horrifying revelation. The flickering neon light outside cast eerie shadows across our faces, amplifying the fear in our eyes. Mark, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke, his voice trembling. "But why? Why are they haunting us?" Before I could answer, the door to the diner creaked open, and a gust of cold wind swept in, sending shivers down our spines. I turned to see a shadowy figure standing in the doorway, its features obscured by the darkness. The figure stepped into the light, revealing a face that was both familiar and foreign, my own doppelganger. "We remember," it said, its voice a chilling echo of my own. "And now you will too." My friends gasped, their eyes wide with terror. The doppelganger's smile widened, a twisted reflection of my own fear. "It's time to face what you've done," it continued, stepping closer. I felt a surge of panic, my mind racing. "We have to get out of here," I whispered urgently to my friends. We scrambled to our feet, the chairs clattering to the floor. As we rushed to the exit, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being herded, driven towards something inevitable. We burst out of the diner and into the cold night, the doppelgangers following us with unnerving precision. The streets were empty, the town eerily silent as we sprinted towards our cars. "Where do we go?" Sarah cried. her voice filled with desperation. "We need to go back," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "Back to the woods. Back to where it all started." "But why?" Tom protested, his eyes wide with fear. "Why would we go back there?" "Because," I replied, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "We need to find a way to close the door, to end this." Mark's face twisted in confusion and fear, but he nodded. "Let's go." We piled into our cars, the engines roaring to life, as we sped towards the woods. The drive was a blur, the road twisting and turning under the pale moonlight. My mind raced with fragments of memories, the ritual replaying over and over in my head. As we neared the edge of the forest, the sense of dread grew stronger. We parked and stepped out into the night, the towering trees looming over us like silent sentinels. "We have to find the exact spot," I said, my voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. "The clearing where we performed the ritual." The path was barely visible, the forest a maze of shadows and whispers. We stumbled through the undergrowth, our flashlights casting eerie beams of light that danced across the gnarled trees. Finally, we reached the clearing. The symbols we had drawn were still faintly visible in the dirt, the remnants of our desperate attempt to cheat death. "We need to reverse it," I said, my voice trembling. "Somehow we need to close the door we opened." Sarah knelt beside the symbols, her fingers tracing the lines in the dirt. "How do we do that?" Before I could answer, Mark's voice cut through the darkness. "There's something you need to know," he said, his tone filled with a strange mix of fear and resignation. I knew what he was going to say. Deep down, I had always known, but I never wanted to admit it. "It's okay," I said. "What? What are you talking about?" Sarah whispered. "The ritual. Do you remember the start of our trip?" "Yeah." "How many of us were there?" "4. "No," Tom interrupted. "Mark wasn't with us." Confusion swept over Sarah's face, which turned into frustration. "Are you saying?" "Yes, you all went to my funeral. And sorry, you tried to bring me back now and it backfired. It's all my fault." Mark nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "It's not your fault. It was my idea." Before we could react, the air around us grew colder, and the shadows deepened. The answer lay in the ritual, in the words we had chanted under the full moon. We had to find a way to reverse them, to undo what we had done. As we discussed our plan, the feeling of being watched never left me. We had started something we didn't understand, something ancient and powerful, and now we had to finish it, or be consumed by it. The night stretched on, the shadows deepening, and as we left the diner to face whatever awaited us, a sense of dread settled over us like a suffocating shroud. The answers we sought lay somewhere in the darkness, but so did the creatures we had brought into our world. And as we ventured back into the woods, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a trap. Heard something in the wall or ceiling? Call us. Hello? We are an independent organization with one purpose: to make you feel good in your own home and restore the peace and quiet. We deal in all kinds of intruders, from cockroaches to rats to raccoons, all sizes and shapes and colors. Safety and comfort is one call away. We offer a high variety of services, accommodated to your needs and inquiries, and have a flexible schedule. Call us anytime. That's the job I work at. For privacy reasons, I won't say the name of the company. The pay is decent, the hours are flexible, and I get uniforms on the house and meals. Yes, I do have to deal with all kinds of infested homes, from termites to roaches to bees, and even intruders like raccoons, foxes, once even a snake. It can be dangerous, but I take my precautions. I can also take phone duty if I'm feeling particularly lazy, like last week. Don't imagine we're working non-stop. We rarely get any calls. Not a lot of incidents happen around here in this village. Last week, however, I had 3 calls, which was interesting enough by itself, because I rarely get this much activity. 3 calls also meant that I had to go do ground duty, because we didn't have enough personnel for 3 interventions in one day. The first call happened at around 6 p.m. "Hello, this is XXX Terminators, where the safety of your home is our priority. How can I help you today?" "Hi, yeah, my name is Emily, and I think there's something in my ceiling." "Hi, Emily, Could you describe the issue with a bit more details? What kind of noises are you hearing? Any signs of anything living up there? Anything like that can help a lot. Okay, so I've been hearing these faint scratches, like rats. The scratches started yesterday around midnight, and at first I thought it was the rain. You know, the way you can hear each individual drop fall on the roof of your house. Then I imagined it must have been the birds, but I ended up realizing it was coming from the attic, because I heard the scratches, like, coming from right above me, and I thought something had gotten into the house. I live next to Helene. Right. So the gas station. Which one? Exactly. The one you pass by going to Caden, or the other one down the road to the bridge? No, the one down the road, to the bridge, right next to the creek. My house is the blue one right when the town starts. I don't have any neighbors. It's Pollen Street. No. 3. So, you know, I'm afraid something got into the house from the forest. It wouldn't be the first time. I just hope this time it isn't a snake. But snakes don't scratch like that. Are you hearing the scratches now? They're really faint, but persistent. Could be rats. Okay, Emily. We'll be on our way soon. Thank you. I sent the team over there, but they couldn't find anything out of place. No insects, no animals, no rats. The next call came around 10 p.m. Hello, this is XXX Terminators, where the safety of your home is our priority. How can I help you today? Hello. I keep hearing these scratches and thuds coming from the ceiling, and I think it moves to the walls. I'm not sure though, but there's definitely something in there. Could you describe the issue with a bit more details? Anything like that can help a lot. The noises started like 3 hours ago. At first I thought it was the pipes, but they're too rhythmic, like footsteps, or more like something dragging its limbs through the walls. I don't understand, and I can't identify the animal. It sounds big. This is an old house, and it's relatively easy to dig through it. I've never heard anything like it. Where is it right now? I can't hear anything right now. I don't know where it went. Could you tell us your address? Pollen Street, no, Seeb. My stomach tensed. Could it be a coincidence? Maybe some raccoon was making its way through homes? All right. Thank you. We'll be on our way. I sent the team to the location and was left alone with Andrew, a co-worker. The night had fallen, and I hated night interventions, so I hoped the phone wouldn't ring again until they came back. Honestly, I was pretty relaxed. There wasn't such a high chance that I'd get any other calls for the day. Rearranging. I lifted my head from the lasagna. Me and Andrew stared at each other. Rearranging. It had been, what, like 30 minutes since the last call? The fuck? Andrew raised his shoulders. I stood up and lifted the receptor. This is, XXX Terminators. How can I help you? I mumbled. There was a pause on the other line, then heavy breathing. Sir? Madam? Are you okay? What happened? You fucking dragged something into the house. What do you mean? Who dragged what? Sir, be more precise. Andrew's eyes widened. What? He whispered. I shook my head and motioned to him to be quiet. Sir, what's going on? Something broke into my house, but there's 2 of them. 2 distinct bodies. Not a raccoon, not a bird. No. And at first I thought there were 2 alive things, but as I listened more, I realized one of them was dragging the other across my attic, on my fucking ceiling. I don't even know how it got there. I ain't heard anything like climbing on the house, like it just landed on the roof then dug down to the attic. I don't know. Right. No, I'm not done. I got scared shitless, because I thought it was a person at first. It sounded big enough to be a person. I was like, shit, it's a murderer. But that was until I heard it eating. Eating? What do you mean? Andrew frowned. The fuck? He mouthed. Yeah. I can hear this heavy thing eating right above me, and I hear the floorboard of the attic creaking. I'm afraid it's gonna come down. The thing is dragging something heavy. Fucking hell. Please just come. I wanted to call 911, but I know it's not human. All right. I will send someone right away. Address and name, please. Who are you gonna send? Andrew asked. There's just us. Finnick Gallon. Pollen Street, no. Fuck me. Okay, sir. We'll be on our way. After I hung up, a moment of silence followed. where me and Andrew just stood there, perplexed. "You know it's us that have to go there, right?" Andrew asked. "I'd really rather not." "Then call Walt. Ask him if they finished there. Are the houses close to each other?" All 3 calls came from the same street, Pollen Street, near the forest. "Fuck. Yeah, call them." I dialed Walt's number. It took a while for him to pick up. "Hi, Walt, you done there? 'Cause I got another call." "Liam, there was no one in that house." My hand was shaking on the receptor. "What do you mean?" "There was no creature, no person, nothing. However, the scene is rather interesting. I'm afraid we'll be busy here for a while." "Why?" "The windows are broken. Furniture destroyed. The attic is covered in scratches and broken wood. And there's the blood. It's fresh. I don't know what happened here, but we need to find your caller and the intruder. We're searching the property." "Right," I responded, my mouth dry. The 3rd call had mentioned something dragging something else. "We need to find your caller." I think I knew where he was. Well, I had never been so afraid. As me and Andrew put on our uniforms, I couldn't help but wonder if I should get the police involved. This was no snake, no fox, no bear. The most frustrating thing was that I didn't know what it was. We took a deep breath and drove into the night. Reached our destination pretty fast. I know what you'll say. If the houses' numbers were so close, why couldn't Walt just take a look at number 11 too? Well, the numbers were really far apart. This area wasn't so populated. I reached this cabin with its lights on. We hesitated, then got out of the car and knocked on the door. I got an instant response. Finnick opened, pale and shaking. "I am so glad you came." I was used to clients being afraid. Finnick, however, was deeply shaken. His eyes were glossy, and his movements irregular. He sensed the same thing I had, that something sinister was going on, but we couldn't quite label it out. I tried to remain calm. "Sir, you can wait in the car if you want." He didn't need to be told twice. Me and Andrew made our way upstairs, to the master bedroom. The house looked pretty normal. Nothing out of place, and nothing broken like on number 7. The bedroom had old, creaking furniture and floors. It was undeniable that something was in the ceiling. I could hear the sound of something being torn apart, and scratching. So much scratching. The ceiling was old too, consisting in some slabs. Andrew and I took out our equipment, gathering our courage to go inside the attic. Had the slabs always had this red tint? I raised my hand and felt them. They were humid and smelled like metal. "Andrew, get your gun." Pulling the attic stairs down, I tried to be as quiet as possible. I didn't want to make our presence known. As silent as we tried to be, the stairs creaked obnoxiously, and I closed my eyes. Fuck. The sounds upstairs stopped. "Okay, you go first," I told Andrew. "Fuck you," he responded, then disappeared into the darkness. "Tob," I heard his footsteps, then a loud echoing scream that turned into an inhuman wail. My first instinct was to crouch and stay on the ground, with my hands on my ears. Then, I heard 2 gunshots and Andrew cursing. More gunshots followed. Then, glass breaking and something batting its wings and wailing. The voice was not human, but had some inflections of a woman. It made my skin crawl. The attic window was broken, and the thing had flown away. I don't know why, but I pulled away the curtain to the bedroom and looked outside for any signs of what it could have been. When Andrew came back down, he was crying. I had never seen him cry. "I saw it. I saw it. I saw it. I saw hell, Liam. I looked right at it. I saw it happen." The sweet smell from the attic made me gag. I put on my mask and went upstairs, leaving Andrew frozen, staring into a corner. The light didn't work, so I had to use my flashlight. The floor was humid and darkened in blood, and the smell lingered, putrid and overwhelming. I couldn't understand at first what I was seeing, and at first it had no impact on me. I didn't realize I was staring at what would turn out to be the second caller. I have never dealt with gore, so my head didn't know how to take it. I guess I knew in some sort of way that that inflated shape was supposed to be the head, and what was above it were the limbs. The stomach lay somewhere farther, and the torso was dug into. I was in shock, and the images just didn't seem real. Above the body, it had carved something on the wooden wall, some symbol. My face felt numb, Remaining in the same position, I made a call. Hey Walt. Yeah? Are you guys done there? Are you okay? You sound weird. Yeah, I blinked a few times, then cleared my voice. Are you done there? We didn't find anything. Did you guys do the other intervention? Oh yeah, we did. And we found the caller. Not all of him though, and the thing is gone now, probably resting. What? Yeah, you might want to come. Since then, I have been giving interviews non-stop, asked to describe the 3 calls and our interventions. The creature, I told them everything. Well, almost everything. That night, I had looked through the window as an instinct. I don't know why. You know how the most horrible things have a way of drawing you in. Pulled the curtain, placed my face close to the window. I hadn't heard it fly away yet. I should have waited for it to leave. In the darkness, I saw 2 eyes shimmering a few inches from mine. 2 eyes that looked so human, I almost thought it was my reflection I was seeing. Except, well, they were upside down, and the other parts of the face had been kind of carved into the flesh, with blood-drained skin sort of stretched over them. Behind the head, large wings, made the same way. It turned its head so it wasn't upside down anymore, but the body remained exactly the same. I felt it had wanted to see me better. Then, it pressed its forehead onto the glass. Fear paralyzed me, but I remained still. I hadn't known it had a mouth until then. When it smiled, it had no teeth, just more skin, not even gums, not even a tongue. Then, it flew away. The rest of its body was stretched out, the limbs curved and molded from the gray flesh. I watched it disappear into the night, leaving nothing but a bloody stain on the window where its forehead had been. I didn't get a lot of sleep after that. I was hesitant to return to the job, but I had no better option. It has been exactly a week since then. As I am typing this, it is almost midnight, and I got a call earlier. Hello, this is XXX Terminators, where the safety of your home is our priority. How can I help you today? There is something in my ceiling, scratching. Address? You didn't even let me finish. Holland Street. No. Man, get out. Just leave. Trust me. What? Yeah. Fuck no. We ain't helping you with that. It's beyond us. That shit needs a priest. Are you kidding? Nope. As I hang up, I know we can run from that forever. And there's this other thing I know. My address is Hamney Lane. No, 34. Right across from Pollen Street. My friends and I started a cult in college. It was funny at first, but it took a sinister turn. 10. Are you sure? Yeah. I counted them many times, Mom. I'm sure. I take a sharp breath, moving my thumb across the edge of the phone. My hand is slippery from the sweat, and my eyes twitch and dart from a corner of the room to another, like an addict. Okay. Does that mean something good? My 12-year-old daughter, Rhea, asks from the other line. I don't know what to tell her. I feel something dripping on the back of my neck. Probably sweat from my hair. Or blood. Yeah, it's fine. Okay, bye. Bye, honey. That morning when I left home, I knew what I had to do. I just hoped they'd start showing up after my return, not before, when Rhea and Jocelyn were home alone. I'd called Rhea and asked her to tell me how many clients had shown up at our door, waiting patiently. That's what I keep telling her. Mommy sells newspapers, and she keeps them in the basement, where she prints them. That's why people keep showing up at our house. When she said 10 people had already gotten there, my heart skipped a beat. That's too many. Way too many. I understand they're eager, but stalking us. With a sigh, I wiped my phone of the blood and put it in my pocket. My black boots are drowning in his sticky, slippery blood. I wish his blood was red. Over the last years, it just keeps getting darker. His open eyes stare right into my soul. He's my Mona Lisa, watching me no matter where I go around the room. My bloody work of art, till death do us part. And now we've parted, at least for another year, until I have to kill him again, because this fucking guy just keeps coming back. After I'm done with the cleanup, I get behind the wheel and head south. That's what we agreed on long ago, when I still loved him. I like to say he lost his love for me throughout the years, but I know his heart never felt it. The road is long and hard to get through. I can feel his eyes from the back seat, and my knuckles are white from gripping the wheel too hard.
Like trees surround us.
I'd have nowhere to go, and no one would hear me scream if I left the car. It keeps getting harder to carry out this fucking burden. I just hope I can put it to an end. I keep getting flashbacks of what used to be. I'll fill you in. I don't even know why I chose this forum. I guess I hoped our followers would see it. I don't even care if they kill us anymore. This rouse has been going for over 15 years. It was 2009, and we were sophomores in college. The parties back then were more authentic. No one bothered to hide or lie or make themselves something they were not. Me, Juliet, Adam, Ophelia, and Anthony used to hang out all the time. This one party was back at this sorority house that I can't really remember the name of. We were all drunk off our faces, and in the dark of the night, when the music and the heat of other people had worn out, we resided to ghost stories and the so-called deep talk. Anthony had his arm around me and was staring into the distance while telling these freshmen about a notorious campus legend he was actually making up on the spot. At one point, someone asked us how we came to know each other. Instead of the real answer, Juliet and Ophelia were sisters, and Adam and Anthony were mine and Julie's boyfriends. Anthony leaned in, eyes wide and sparkling, and lowered his voice. We're in a cult. The freshman, also drunk off his face, laughed and wiped his face. Yeah, okay. You didn't tell them, did you? I asked Anthony, pulling myself away from his embrace. It's no harm. Relax. It's not like I'm recruiting them or something. Even though Julie and Off hadn't been close enough to hear, they caught on the joke. Look, Julie began. If you want to laugh, it's fine. It's not that big of a deal. Anyway, not like we've killed somebody yet. But we're planning to, Ois said. Anthony shushed her. It's late. Let's all go home. He gave us a fake warning look, but Ophelia's face was gleaming as she continued. It's really a matter of time. You don't know what someone can do with enough ambition. At that point, some kid who we'd assumed had passed out on the couch lifted his head. What the fuck are you guys talking about? I let out a sigh. I thought you were sleeping. You shouldn't have brought it up, Tony. Brought what up? Some other girl asked, passing by. We're in a cult, Anthony said again. I don't get why you're all so secretive about it. It's the most fun I've had in my life. Some didn't believe us and told us to fuck off. But the few that did leaned in. This girl Laura had heard us say we wanted to kill someone, and even if I suspect she didn't really believe in our cult, started asking us questions, thinking we were some deranged people who were actually planning a murder. So, what is this cult about? What do you worship? Oh, it's kind of a long story. Wouldn't even know how to explain it. I sighed. Is it a deity? A god? Adam's face dropped. We don't believe in gods. He spat out. Then, is one of you the leader? No, I replied at the same time as Julie, who had said yes. I mean, it's not that easy. None of us met him yet. We are only a few of the members who get to talk to him. The others are initiates. The laughter around us started to dissolve, as more and more people gathered around, believers or non-believers, who just needed something entertaining to listen to. At some point, one guy, Ronan, in an attempt to poke fun at us, asked us if we were actually just organizing orgies. Anthony turned to him, his mind damp from alcohol, and slapped him across the face. The room fell silent. You think we're joking? People die trying to get in. And you think we're some weird sex freak club who worships some old guy. You have no idea. And even if you had, you wouldn't accept it. Some of you are that close-minded. You wouldn't know what it takes to be part of this. You're all in your 20s and walk around thinking you have some purpose on this earth, only to end up working 9 to 5s and shooting yourselves in the head at 40. We don't strive for heaven, and we don't fear hell. Our destiny is much more than a simple coin toss and trying to make it off the naughty list. There is no crime on this earth that isn't excusable, but even the smallest of deeds can be punished. We are loyal to ourselves and to him and him only. No other gods, no statues. His passion had startled us, but it was amusing. Anthony then added, if you want to know what it's like to actually be part of something greater, to guard your soul and lead it where it needs to be, then I'm here for any questions. What about killing people? Someone asked in the back. Anthony smiled. Every cult has objectives. We move towards evolution, whatever the cost. The next week had passed normally. and we laughed off our cult. It became an inside joke between us, but no one really asked us about it. I think most people had forgotten our late-night talk. That was until March 11th, when a student, Sonia, threw herself off the 7th floor of the science building. She had committed suicide, and there wasn't enough proof to pin it on anyone else. However, as I was walking to my dorm one night after dark, someone stopped me. I recognized the kid from the party. "Did you do it?" "What? Did you kill her?" "Your cult?" My eyes widened, and his grip on my hand tightened. I'm not a cop. It's okay. I want in." "What?" "I want in. Your cult. I'll pay you." "That was a joke, Christian. We aren't actually in a cult. We were drunk as shit and wanted to make fun of you." He let go of my hand. "You don't need to hide from me. Don't try to play it off." I tried to walk away, but he grabbed me again. "Look, we're really similar. I have had urges throughout all my life. It's stared with animals. I just wish I could do something greater with them. I want in. I want to help you towards your great plan. I don't know what it is that you worship, but I'm eager to find out." I freaked out, and, seeing I could not escape his desperate pleas, I told him to just talk to Anthony. When I met my boyfriend, a few days later, he had a radiating smile and took me to a way fancier diner than what we frequented. "Hume, what's up with you? You've suddenly got money, or what? Were you a millionaire in secret?" He shook his head. "Remember that Christian kid?" I frowned. That counted as an answer to him, who continued. "He bought the whole cult thing. His dad died a while ago, and he's got a fucking fortune on his hands. I told him I'd make him an initiate if he made a donation to help our research." "What the fuck? What research?" "Look, he agreed to make donations from time to time, and I just blabbered about how to cause and whatever. It's not like hell go to the police. He can. Some girl died and we indirectly tied ourselves to it, and now we're taking advantage of him and stealing his money. The kid's a fucking psychopath already. He killed his dad, Emma. He says anything, or report him. You have no proof." He admitted it to me. I turned my head away, and he grabbed my hand. "Thousands of dollars," he said, kissing me on the cheek. "Do the others know?" "He'll tell them." "Oh, and I gave our deity a name. Everything needs a name, if we're gonna worship it." "What is it?" "Cano, tear." "It came to me in a dream," he said, and I couldn't tell if he was joking or not. Over the next 3 years, our cult gathered more followers. The cult of Canu, whose followers had no name and no race, no age, no gender. We were individuals striving to not be judged, and lived free by our own rules. Me, Ophelia, Juliet, Adam and Anthony were the 5 fingers of Canu's hand, and each of us had our undisclosed duties towards the deity that involved donations from the other members. It was all thanks to Anthony, whose preacher qualities were undeniable. The audience helped, too, mostly seeked isolated individuals with urges just like Christians, who wanted to believe their anomalies in thinking could help towards a greater cause. We'd tell them to hold back their killer instincts and wait for our call, which never came, and keep donating to our research. Authorities never caught on it. How could some serial killer wannabe report us to the police? What could they say? "Yeah, these guys took all my money, and I haven't killed anyone yet." Seriously, everything went really well in those 3 years. We'd made a lot of money off lying to people, and we even put some effort into this cult. Me and Ophelia drew pictures, visions of Kanu, and claimed to read articles to people of his doings in the past. We'd search up murders and disappearances and tie them to him. Christian, our very first follower, had started doing drugs and claiming to see him. He was a devoted member and made donation after donation, treating us like gods and saying he was awaiting our call. He'd send us sketches of his visions, which were mostly bloodied corpses and screaming faces. He kept drawing faces over and over again, and one stood out in particular, Midas Ophelius, who was terribly annoyed. I knew he was in love with me, but I really don't like his drawings. Tears are streaming down my face as I hit the gas. In the back seat, his eyes are shiny, as if he'd been crying. He tries to hum to calm me down, but his throat is slit, and the air gushes out of the cut, making him sound like a pig. Ophelia and I were roommates. I came home one night and found the door open, not unlocked, opened. Her body was laying in her bed, whose sheets had turned red, and her head was missing. That's all I remember. I don't know much else. Everything was a blur after that. We couldn't find the head, and I threw out all of my red clothes, because I couldn't stand the color anymore. Christian said Kanu came to him in a vision and asked him to kill her. The police had caught him drugged off his ass 5 days later and arrested him, -25 to life. No one cared that he'd spit out our names. They all thought he was a junkie. When I visited him in prison a few weeks later, I did it just to ask him where he'd put the head. He said he left her intact. I stabbed her. I didn't cut her throat. That was our last conversation with him, before he killed himself in prison. Grief does weird things to you. Anthony and I got married that year, and so did Julie and Adam. We thought that might help us stay united. It didn't. The problem is, when you try to stop a cult, your followers might refuse. Telling them it had been a ruse for so long was out of the question. Instead, we crowned Christian as a hero and told them we'd go on a hiatus, as Kanu had received his sacrifice. The hiatus didn't last long, because the majority of our audience had a certain thirst for blood and began stalking us and our families. Pregnant with Rhea, I told Anthony he needed to do something. The cult began its activity again, this time with some strict rules. No one, apart from the 4 of us, could have visions. No one was to act on their instincts unless Kanu asked them, and Kanu only talked to the 4 of us. The symbol of the cult was a hand with its pinky finger missing, symbolizing Ophelia's death. I began seeing these necklaces everywhere with the hand on them, and by now we'd gathered about 1,000 followers. With their monthly donations, we could give up working and retire. Even though everything had left a sour taste on me, I accepted this wicked way of living, knowing there was no way to back out now. There was no corner on this earth where we could go and hide, because these psychopaths could find us. I didn't know at the time, but we would find Ophelia's head way later. 9 years later, in fact, intact. And in that same day, Anthony would die for the first time, because turns out, when you mess with blood magic, even if you make up a name like Kanu, the real deity finds you, no matter what name you give it. I have to stop now. If I speak too much about this, I fear it will feel summoned, more than I already have to summon it. I need you to know that I'm doing this for my kids. As I step into the gas station, I fear the cashier will look over my shoulder and see Anthony's body in the car. Then I see the cashier's hand necklace with a missing pinky finger, and I realize I have nothing to worry about. I work at a funeral home. Some of the dead bodies are smiling. For the past 2 years, I've been working as a mortician at a funeral home in a small town. I actually love it here. I listen to lots of audiobooks. My boss is great, and I don't mind the company of the dead. They're quiet, and they're not trying to sell me something, which is a lot more than I can say for most of the living. I also feel like preparing the bodies for burial is an act of respect, a service to the community, something that gives my life meaning. Without a doubt, working here was the best job I'd ever had, until we started getting the smiling corpses. I don't know when it started.
Exactly. 3 weeks ago.
I think, although time has been passing strangely since it all began. When it started, of course, not all the bodies were smiling. It was just 1 or 2. Then we started getting more and more of them, and everything began to spiral out of control. To be clear, yes, I know that sometimes the deceased appear to be smiling slightly. Sometimes their facial features are built that way, sort of a resting, happy face. Sometimes we even turn their lips up a little to make their faces seem more familiar, more alive, instead of the cold mask of death. But these bodies weren't smiling slightly. No, they were full-on grins, stretching dead skin to the corners of their mouths. They were grotesque. The first one came on a cold, rainy day. Her name was Amber, and she was 31 years old, much younger than the bodies I usually worked with. Shed died of a sudden blood clot. As much as I liked my job, I hated dealing with the younger ones. Before I even unzipped the body bag, I was imagining the small children she may have left behind, the aging parents grieving their daughter, the friends and family mourning a life gone too soon. I extinguished the thoughts and got to work. I turned on the light, rolled the steel bed a little closer to me, and reached for the body bag zipper. But when I unzipped her, I froze. She was smiling, Her lips were pressed tightly together, covering her teeth, and the corners of her mouth sharply curved upwards. An expression like that wouldn't just require you to move your facial muscles, it would require you to hold them like that. I quickly unzipped the rest of the bag. But she was definitely dead. Her skin was as white as marble. Her eyes were closed. Her lips were blue.
What the fuck?
Maybe she was somehow alive. Hands shaking, I gently touched her lips, then her cheeks. Her skin was so cold. I reached into the body bag and pulled out her bony wrist, checking for a pulse. There wasn't any. Now, if I weren't a mortician, I'd be thinking no big deal. She died smiling and rigor mortis set in. But I knew that was impossible. Rigor mortis takes hours. If she died smiling, her face would naturally relax into a neutral setting before everything went stiff. I stood there, my head spinning. There was no way she was alive. But there was no way she could be grinning like this. Dead. Not knowing what else to do, I called my boss in. He looked just as confused as I was. Maybe she had some sort of deformity, he said. And this is her natural expression. I don't think so. The next theory was that the coroner was doing it before the bodies got to us. Maybe it was a prank, or maybe he thought he was helping us, making the bodies look a little less dead. He was a bit odd, so it wasn't out of the question. But even if he made them smile, the smile would fade before they got here. I pointed out, that kind of smile, with her lips covering her teeth like that, requires the muscles to stay flexed. Alan didn't know what to say to that, so he excused himself to call the coroner. When he came back, his expression was grim. Jack said she wasn't smiling when he was doing the autopsy. Dread flooded me, like someone had just dumped a bucket of ice water over me. So the smile had happened after Shed died. On the drive over from the coroner? That's impossible, I said, my voice wavering. I know. Who else had access to the body? He shook his head. No one should have had access to the body, except us, the coroner, and the drivers who delivered her. Well, fuck. We made a few more calls to police officers, medical examiners, even a few EMTs, but no one knew what we were talking about. And the body had been securely locked away after the autopsy, according to the coroner. It looked like no one had tampered with the body. So, maybe it was just something about Amber, something congenital, some sort of disease or something, that her mouth turned up in a smile several hours after death. I knew it made no sense, but what else was I supposed to tell myself? That some demon had possessed her dead body and made it smile, that a ghost was holding up the corners of her mouth. Nothing made sense. What should I do with her? I asked Alan. Set her features like normal, I guess, he replied. Call me back if there's anything else. Weird. Then he turned on his heel and walked away. So that's what I did. After pacing the room a few times to calm myself down, I walked back over to the body. I positioned my index and middle fingers over the corners of her mouth, and in one swift motion, pushed down. Something felt different. I poked and prodded her cheeks, frowning. Usually cheeks are soft, with the cheekbones and jawbones giving them structure, but her cheeks felt firm all over, like they had their own internal structure, somehow. Maybe she had work done, like fillers or Botox. I thought. I poked and prodded some more, but that only confused me further. Something just felt off about the way her bones and facial muscles were all fitting together, just underneath the skin. I called Alan back over. Does her face feel weird to you? He poked and prodded at her face as well, frowning. A little bit, he said, finally, but not abnormally. Could be plastic surgery. That's what I thought. Hey, maybe that's why she's smiling. I mean, it's possible, I guess, he replied. Then he left, and I was back to setting her features all alone in the morgue. My fingers worked over her cold skin quickly, trying to get the whole thing over with as fast as possible. But the more I worked, the more time I spent with her alone in this room, the more panicked I became. Suddenly, I felt dizzy. I couldn't breathe, couldn't get enough oxygen. My legs felt weak underneath me. I was on the verge of a panic attack. I stepped away from the body, forced myself to take a deep breath. Name 5 things you can see, I told myself. Cabinets, hand sanitizer, scissors, linens, and Amber's dead body. This grounding technique wasn't quite as effective when I was in the morgue room. I'd never had a panic attack here before, The bodies had never bothered me like this. I was always able to dissociate it from the person who lived in it. I was always able to convince myself it was just dead flesh, just something left behind, no different than the strands of hair and dead skin we leave behind when we're alive. But this time was different. The grotesque grin, pushing my fingers hard into her flesh, forcing her mouth to turn down. Something deep inside me snapped. I took a few more minutes to collect myself, taking in deep, calming breaths. Then I forced myself to continue working. I walked over to the cabinet, got out the clear thread, and started to sew her mouth shut. You had to. Otherwise their mouth would loll open and look weird. I'd forgotten to do it once, and it was the only time Alan yelled at me. But as I worked on the stitches, I couldn't stop picturing Amber's grin, and I felt like there was more resistance from her lips than there should been. Or was I imagining it? The needle slipped against my fingers, but I forced myself to keep going, even though my heartbeat was ratcheting up again. I ran a comb through her dyed blonde hair, arranging it with my hands. I swirled a brush into pressed powder and swept across her cheeks, her forehead, her nose. I chose a nice, natural, peach-colored lipstick and applied it to her lips. Then, I was done. I put the final touches on her face, poking and prodding here and there, and then it was over. I stepped back and gave her a final look. Honestly, I'd done a pretty great job. Her expression was perfectly peaceful. She almost looked like she was asleep. Then I left the room to grab the pair of earrings that the family left for her. As soon as I put them in, I'd be done, and I'd never have to look at this woman ever again. I grabbed them from the office, then hurried back to the morgue. I froze. Amber was smiling again. "Alan," I shouted. "Alan." The floor spun underneath me. I heard Alan's footsteps behind me, quickly approaching. I was losing my balance. I stumbled over to the wall and leaned against it, trying not to fall. I set her features. I told him. I stitched her mouth shut, and she's grinning again. Alan stood there frozen, his mouth hanging open, his brown skin ashen. Without a word, he walked into the room, looking over her. For several seconds he didn't say anything. "I've never seen anything like this," he said, finally. I joined him at her side, looked down at her awful, smiling face. I noticed one of the stitches had snapped. A piece of clear thread trailed out of her mouth. "It couldn't be Ben playing with us, could it?" I asked. I wished it was. With all my being, I wished this was some ridiculous prank, and not the body moving on its own. Ben was the other mortician. He was considerably younger than me and Alan, only 21, and heavily influenced by social media. He was always filming something, or talking about some TikTok challenge he'd done. It was nauseating. I don't think so. He's supposed to be getting the other body ready, but we can check the security footage. Alan had installed security cameras in every room of the funeral home, after someone had broken in over the summer. I followed him down the hallway, feeling a little better with each step I put between myself and Amber. He sat down at the desk and pulled up the security footage. I held my breath as he hit play. I watched the screen as I worked on Amber's body, in the grainy black and white footage. I watched as I left to get the earrings. The door swung shut. 1 second passed. 2, and then it happened. The corners of Amber's mouth yanked up, like they were attached to fishing line that had suddenly been pulled taut. "What the hell?" Alan said. That can't happen, can it?" I asked, my voice shaking. "No, there's no way that can happen. Dead bodies move after death. On occasion, twitching is common, caused by the release of chemicals left over in nerve endings. Decomposition can also make the body move. I'd read an article about a man whose arms had stretched straight out at his sides, weeks after death, because of decomposition. But this wasn't decomposition, because she'd been presumably stored properly since her death, and this wasn't a random twitch either. It was a grin. I'd read somewhere, in some inspirational article somewhere, that it took only 12 muscles to smile, and many more to frown. That meant all 12 of Amber's facial muscles were working in concert, making and holding a smile. It made no sense. Alan rewound the footage, playing the footage over and over again, muttering to himself about rigor mortis and other medical jargon. But I couldn't sit there and keep watching it. Each time I saw that grin yank up again, I felt like I might vomit. I left the office and hurried back to the morgue. I wanted Amber gone. And she would be, tomorrow morning, when we drove her to the cemetery. Whatever this all was, it would be gone and over with by 11 a.m. tomorrow. All I had to do was set her face again, load her into one of the refrigerated cabinets, and my job was done. When I opened the door, I found Ben standing over Amber's corpse. "Whoa," he said, as I walked in. "What you do to this one?" "Nothing. She came like that." "Seriously? What's wrong with her?" "Nothing, to my knowledge. But she's smiling." "I know." He glanced back at me, obviously confused. "I don't know what's going on, okay? And neither does Alan. She looks like she's grinning, and when I set her face, she went back to grinning. Her face just does that, and we don't know why. She looks really creepy," he said with a grin. And then I saw his hand twitch towards his pocket, towards his phone. "Don't you even think about taking a picture?" I snapped at him. I guess to Ben, the allure of making a viral TikTok video outweighed the chances of ruining his entire career. Ben left, looking dejected. Idiot. As soon as he was gone, I forced myself to re-sew her mouth shut. Then I pushed the corners of her mouth down, hard, until she looked like she was frowning. Maybe that was my problem last time. Maybe I needed to set her features in the complete opposite direction. I'm sure the family would be pissed to see her frowning at the funeral, but I didn't care. Then I slid her into the cabinet. As soon as the door shut, relief flooded me. It's over. I'm done. Little did I know, Amber was just the beginning. The next week, we got more smiling corpses. Jasmine, 47, pronounced dead at the scene of a car accident. Eleanor, 62, dead after a long battle with pancreatic cancer. John, 23, dead from a mugging gone wrong. All smiling. Alan and I called the police, the coroner, the delivery people, but no one reported seeing the bodies smiling. There were police reports too, from the car accident and the mugging, but none of those mentioned a smile. It seemed certain all the bodies had started smiling after they died, which didn't make a lick of sense. Alan started calling colleagues of his, even professors at the local college, but none of them knew. He started floating various theories. Maybe the coroner was using contaminated tools or substances that the body was having a post-mortem allergic reaction to. Maybe they were being stored at a slight incline, and that was moving the facial muscles. Of course, this didn't explain why the bodies started smiling again even after we set their features, but we were grasping at straws. No one had a possible explanation for what was going on. I pondered all this as I pulled on my rubber gloves and started work on John. I stared down at him, his pale face, his stubble-lined lips twisted into a smile. The grin somehow looked even more grotesque on his young face. I worked on autopilot. I yanked the corners of his mouth down into a deep frown. Then I grabbed the clear thread and, steadying my shaking hands, plunged the needle into his lips. I used double the number of stitches. Maybe that would stop the smile from reappearing. Because despite all my work on Amber's face, her smile had reappeared. We'd gotten an irate call from her sister at the funeral. "Hey Sam, can you come here for a second?" Ben asked, from the other side of the morgue. Sure." I followed him over, who'd been working on another smiling body, an older woman in her 50s or 60s. I didn't remember her name, as Ben had been in charge of her. "Her file says she was 160 pounds when she died," he said, "but she feels really light, to me." I grabbed her by the shoulders and shifted her on the table a little. "Huh, yeah," I replied. "She does feel a little light." I grabbed her by her midsection and shook her a little more. Ben was right. If I wasn't looking right at her, I would have guessed this woman was no more than 100 pounds. "Let's weigh her again," I said. Maybe the coroner entered the wrong weight, so we rolled her onto the scale. When the number came up, my heart dropped. 97 pounds. There's no way this woman is 97 pounds, I said. I know. I stared down at her, slightly taller than average, with an average physique. She'd have to be rail thin to be 97 pounds, if she could even get to that weight at all. Ben told me he'd discuss it with Alan, and then continued preparing her for burial. I went back to working on John. I tried to not even look at his face, just focusing on getting him ready, like it was as mundane as sweeping the floor or folding clothes. But then, as my hands worked, I had a moment of clarity. 5 smiling corpses had come in now. If it were just one, Or even 2. Maybe it could be explained away as an allergic reaction, or a deformity, or whatever Alan's theory of the day was. But 5? When, as far as we knew, this had never happened before. There was really only one explanation that suddenly hit me like a ton of bricks. Something was infecting them. Maybe some sort of parasite or bacteria. Maybe in the town's water supply. I suddenly had the mental image of a pale leech-like creature slithering around in John's mouth, stretching his lips into that hideous smile. Then something even worse occurred to me. If I touched their faces, was I now infected? Panic set in. My mouth felt itchy, or stiff, or something. I left John on the table and ran to the bathroom. I washed my hands, over and over again. Of course, if it were infectious, it was probably too late. But I had to do something. Of course, when I got back to the morgue, John was grinning again. The stitches had snapped, and a single drop of blood coated his lips. Fuck, fuck, fuck. I stared down at him, my entire world tunneling down into a single focal point. His mouth. I had to look inside his mouth and make sure there weren't any squiggling, writhing leeches in there. Holding my breath, I pushed my fingers into his mouth and yanked his jaw open. No. For a split second, I thought I saw a flicker of movement in the darkness of his throat. I grabbed my phone and turned the flashlight on. Hand shaking, I lifted it over his mouth and peered in. Nothing was there. I shone the flashlight all around, even lifting his lips to look at his gums and teeth, but I didn't see anything. I let out the breath I'd been holding. Get a grip. I closed his mouth. Then I forced myself to take a few deep breaths, slowly letting them out. Everything is fine. Stop scaring yourself. Calm down. I re-sewed his mouth shut, even though I knew it was probably futile. My entire body was shaking with tension, and I needed something to keep busy. As I worked though, I noticed something else odd. Hadn't John died in a mugging gone wrong? Hadn't he been stabbed? Yet his pale skin was as perfect as porcelain. No purple bruises, no stab wounds as far as I could see. Then again, he was dressed. Ben had done that earlier, so it was very possible that all his wounds were covered by clothes. Still, I dealt with a few victims of muggings and other violent crimes in my career, and none of them looked as pristine as John did, even when fully dressed. Other than his deathly blue pallor, he looked as if he were in perfect health, just sleeping. I shuddered and loaded him into the cabinet, desperate to not be looking at him anymore. A few days later, we got a visit from the sheriff. He sat with us in Alan's office, arms crossed, giving each of us an icy glare. "I'm going to have to ask you to stop investigating this," he told us plainly. "What? Why?" Alan asked. "It's attracting too much attention," he replied. "I got a call from WBX the other day, and they want to do a story on it, asking all kinds of questions. We don't want people, outsiders, poking around in our business, you know." "With all due respect," Alan replied, "it seems like this kind of thing has never been documented before. One of the professors at Hawthorne wants to." "No," the sheriff replied, cutting him off. "We don't want any studies conducted. Nothing of the sort, okay?" "You can make us to stop," Alan told him. "I can't," he agreed. "But let me ask you this, Alan. Do you like lawsuits? Because if there's a news story on WBX about smiling corpses, you better believe the families affected are going to be looking for someone to blame. And that someone is going to be you." A heavy silence filled the room. Sir Alan averted his eyes. "Understood," he finally muttered quietly. "Good." And with that, the sheriff was gone. Alan cooled it on the investigation. After that, I could tell it really bothered him, but the funeral home was his pride and joy. He'd bought it from the Moyners several years back, and had turned it from a small operation to one of the biggest funeral homes in the county. He didn't want a scandal or lawsuits, more than anyone. So, he shut up. We continued to receive more smiling corpses. We stayed quiet about it. Alan ordered some sort of industrial-strength adhesive, and when we used that on the lips instead of the thread, it seemed that the smiles didn't come back. And so for weeks, that's how we dealt with one of the most horrific things to happen in our small town. We glued corpses' mouths shut. 3 weeks had passed since the first corpse arrived. We'd received a total of 27 so far. Alan had stopped investigating, and just continued buying more and more of the adhesive by the gallon jug. But I was getting really concerned at this point, so I continued to do investigating of my own. Untraceable, anonymous stuff. So Alan wouldn't get mad at me. Internet sleuthing and the like. All my investigations into their deaths came up as dead ends. So I turned to their lives. There didn't seem to be a common thread, however. The smiling victims were every age, gender, occupation, ethnicity, religion. They seemed to have absolutely nothing in common, until I looked up their addresses. All the victims lived within a square mile of each other. I printed out a map of the town, and in red pen, made a little dot where each of the smiling ones had lived. They formed a cluster on the west side of town, with several of them coming from the same street, the street bordering the woods of the state park. I uncapped the red pen, and wrote the date above each dot, not necessarily their death date, but the date we'd received the body from our internal records. That's when I came to a horrifying conclusion. The first several bodies, including Amber's, had come from that street. The next bunch had come from the streets surrounding it. The most recent ones, however, had come from the areas furthest from that street. In other words, it was spreading. The nexus was that street, with the smiling corpses spreading outwards towards the rest of town like some sort of virus. What the hell? The three most recent ones had come from only a half-mile away from the funeral home. I explained all of this to Alan in his office, in a near whisper with the doors closed. "It's spreading," I said, pointing to the map. "You're not supposed to be looking into this," he said angrily, although I had a feeling his anger was more about the sheriff than about me. "Look, I'm sorry, okay? But now that I know this, we have to do something." "Do what exactly?" "Tell the police, like they would actually help us," he scoffed. "And it doesn't seem like it's actually harming anyone. Clearly it's not killing people, because all of them had a legitimate cause of death. Like, a lot of the smiling bodies, they're from people who died of cancer. So, what? This thing is causing cancer? I don't know, but this isn't a coincidence." Alan buried his face in his hands and let out a groan. "If we tell everyone, there's gonna be a panic, and I might go out of business." "So, what? We just keep it a secret?" I asked. "I don't know. I honestly don't. I've never come across anything like this." He let out a sigh. "Just give me some time to think about it, okay? A few days. We'll figure something out." I left his office disturbed. Alan always did the right thing, even when it meant his business suffering. I remember last year, our car had gotten into an accident while transporting a body, and it had gotten a little damaged. He could have easily said the bump on her head was there when the body arrived, or tried to cover it with her hair and hoped they didn't notice. But he told them the truth, that we didn't package the body correctly, and there was an accident. We lost half of the funeral expenses, but Alan believed in doing the right thing. Or so I thought. We couldn't just keep this a secret. Something awful was happening here, and it was spreading. So I decided to take matters into my own hands. I drove down to that area of town myself, to see if there was anything I could figure out. I wouldn't get out of the car, in case there was something in the air, a virus, a pathogen, fungal spores, but I would drive around and see if anything struck me. The street was within a wealthy neighborhood, a development of McMansions that had been built last year. I kept the heat off, to not let any sort of pathogen into the car, and continued driving. It was only 9 o'clock, but everything appeared closed, neon signs for gas stations and convenience stores glowing brightly in the darkness. Everything was still, silent. Then I drove up the hill and turned onto the street. I stared up at the houses. They were so sterile and harsh-looking, white with trim and gutters painted black. The wood between the window panes was painted black too, making the house look more like a prison than a home. Not sure whether it was the wealth of the place, or some sort of sixth sense, an instinctual feeling, but I felt unwelcome, like I was trespassing, like everyone in these houses was watching me, watching the beat-up sedans scutter along their pristine streets. I need to get out of here, now. I could turn around in a driveway, but I felt like that could provoke someone. My headlights would be shining right in their windows. The cul-de-sac was only about 10 yards ahead of me anyway. When I got to the cul-de-sac, however, I froze. There were no houses here. Instead, the entire area had been cordoned off with chain link fence. A sign hung from the metal, reading in big red letters, "Keep out." I rolled the car forward to get a better look. The site had clearly been prepared for building. Sure, the grass was long, but there weren't any trees, and the area was unnaturally flat. Within the fenced-in area, I saw two large, rectangular holes. The basements had been dug out already, the foundations ready to be poured, but the developer had abandoned them. Why? This development had been in high demand. I'd driven past this area of town while they were building it, and the starting price of the homes had shot up more than 50% between breaking ground and finishing the last house. So if the demand was there, and there was money to be made, why did they just stop? Maybe they found something, I thought. Maybe they dug up something. Maybe they dug up a parasite or virus or some other kind of pathogen. I'd read that climate change was causing ice to melt in the Arctic, and it was releasing pathogens. Wasn't there some outbreak of something in Siberia several years back? Who was to say there weren't pathogens under the ground too, laying in wait, dormant, until someone dug them up? I desperately wanted to get out of the car and take a closer look, but I knew that would be a really bad idea, so I inched the car forward until my tires bumped the curb. Then I flicked on the high beams. I froze. The dirt wall of the left hole looked disturbed. The soil was rough and dark, rather than smooth and crusted over. Just an animal, I told myself. Probably just a raccoon or something that fell down there and was scrambling to get out. Even though I told myself that, I hit the gas and sped home as fast as I could. Did you know they found this really weird dead animal where they're building those big houses by Johnson Park? It took me many hours of internet sleuthing to find out any information, but I finally did. A few random posts on local websites claimed the building sites had been abandoned because the soil had too much clay in it, or the rock underneath wasn't structurally sound. But there was one post on a local forum last year that I would have easily dismissed as a conspiracy theory if I hadn't been dealing with smiling dead bodies on a day-to-day basis. My husband's cousin works on the construction team. He said when they were excavating, they found this dead animal, except it looked like nothing he'd ever seen. A really long, thin body and bluish-white skin like a cave creature or something, like our very own Montauk monster. I stared at the computer screen, stunned. That was it. Patient zero. I told Alan everything I found. Unfortunately, he seemed to take me less seriously than before, his eyebrows raising higher and higher as I told him everything. That thing must have died from whatever the pathogen was, and when it was dug up, it infected someone. So you think the construction workers dug up this monster, and then it spread some disease to them, somehow? Yeah. Did any of the construction workers die? I frowned. She didn't say anything about it. But, like you said, the pathogen doesn't kill people. Yeah, but wasn't this last year? We had been getting smiling bodies for months then, if what you're saying is true. I think they only broke ground on the last two houses recently. Besides, maybe it has a dormant phase or something. Alan sighed. I mean, I suppose everything you're saying could be true, but it sounds extremely far-fetched. I know. We'll think on it. I promise. This time his tone sounded more sincere. But right now, we've got to get back into work. A few bodies arrived today, and one of them is smiling, so good luck with that. I bought new adhesive, by the way. Extra strength. I got the message that this was the end of the conversation, loud and clear. Reluctantly, I walked out of his office and headed back to the morgue. Oh great, thanks, I replied, rolling my eyes. Ben was already in there, working on someone else. He glanced up at me and grinned. Left the smiling one for you, he said. This day was just getting worse and worse by the minute. Oh, cool. As I flipped through the man's files, however, I felt a rush of relief. He's supposed to be cremated, I told Ben. I rolled my eyes. Ben loved the cremator. For some reason, not many people in Clearwater chose to be cremated. Whenever one did, Ben got excited. What is it with some people and fire? We rolled the body down to the cremator and got the man inside. The door clanked shut, and Ben adjusted the settings, then looked at me. I gave him a thumbs up. He pulled the lever, and then we heard it. The flames whooshed on. A faint, high-pitched screech joined the pops and crackles of the fire, almost like the shrill sound of a whistle, except more human. Ben and I looked at each other, eyes wide. Should I turn it off? Ben replied, his face white. What is that? I asked. I nodded. He yanked the lever down, but it was too late. The remains had already been reduced to lumps of charred ash. "There's no chance he was actually alive, right?" Ben asked. For the first time, he looked utterly panicked. So even though I wasn't particularly fond of Ben, I gently led him back to the morgue and showed him the records. The man had died several days ago and been stored in a refrigerated cabinet. There was no way he could be still alive. Ben, relieved, excused himself for an early lunch break. No. I sat there alone in the morgue, phone in hand, swiveling gently in the chair. First, even if the man was dead, there could still be a parasite alive inside him. Something was bothering me, though I didn't want to tell Ben. A quick search told me yes. There was a 3-centimeter marine worm that lived off the coast of Japan, for example, that could make loud popping sounds. Could things like leeches and tapeworms make noise? EO. We usually leave the bodies in the cremator for 2 to 3 hours, because while the soft tissue gets reduced to ash pretty fast, the bones take hours to fully carbonize. But there was something else bothering me too. The remains we pulled out should have been a skeleton. How did an entire skeleton burn up so fast? Instead, they were just a pile of ash. I raked through the entire 10-page forum thread where the woman had talked about the body found at the construction site. But my faith in her story started to flag. On page 3, she linked to her blog post, which was filled with both obnoxious ads and talk about aliens. She claimed they'd found metal scraps at the construction site too, burned and twisted. Our very own Roswell incident. I sighed, shaking my head. I spent the rest of the day sneaking away on my phone, researching, but everything seemed to reach a dead end. I got out a piece of paper and wrote down everything I knew so far. The convergence of cases on that one street, the weird construction site, the smiling bodies, which had other abnormalities, not bruising, weighing less than they should, and burning up faster. After that, I wrote down everyone involved. The police, the sheriff, the coroner Jack, the delivery companies, and the 3 of us, Alan, Ben, me. That didn't come up with much though. Most parasites were uninterested in bones. I then did a ton of searches whether certain pathogens or parasites could alter bone density. The whole thing about the skeleton not burning up seemed like the only fact I could cling to. It wasn't a gray area. It was black and white. The bones burned up when they shouldn't have. The man who led one of the delivery companies was named Elias. Several more searches only produced one interesting fact that was probably more of a coincidence than anything else. The guy who worked on the construction site, mentioned in the forum posts, was also named Elias. A spark of an idea lit within me. Could Elias be patient 0? Hard at work, I see, Alan said, when he found me sitting in the morgue, staring at my phone. "Oh, sorry," I said hastily. "Just taking a quick break." He didn't look happy. Oh. Well, it was true that I'd spent a good part of the workday on my phone. "Sorry," I said again. "Yeah, he cut out 10 minutes early," Alan said with a sigh. "Anyway, they should be here by 6. If they're not, you can just leave. And if they're mad, they have to take the body back to the coroner. That's their problem." "No, it's fine. Listen, we have a delivery on the way, but I got to get home. Jay's got a fever and stuff. Can you stay?" I guess so. Did Ben already leave?" "I think the power's out in a few places though. There was some bad thunder earlier." "Sounds good." "Yeah, well," another sigh. "Anyway, I'll lock up and everything. All you need to worry about is getting the body in. I'll pay overtime, of course, too." "Great." Alan left, and then it was just me, alone in the funeral home. I sat by the window, waiting, watching the rain pound on the glass. The street and sidewalk glistened red, reflecting the myriad of taillights from all the braking cars. I saw a couple hurry past, angling their umbrella in front of them to try and block the rain. As the woman glanced up at our sign, she scrunched her face in disgust. We usually didn't get pedestrians here, even though we were just off Main Street. People didn't like being reminded of their own mortality. And then, the delivery arrived, a sleek, dark van, rolling into the driveway. My heart pounded as I realized the text on the door read Everson Delivery Services. That was the delivery company Elias ran. I hurried downstairs. The funeral home is on a hill, and the back door is on the basement level with the morgue. Alan thought it was so convenient, but I thought it was a nuisance, going up and downstairs all the time. When I finally got to the back door, the 2 men were already rolling the body out of the back. Thanks for waiting, the shorter one said, smiling at me. His smile instantly dropped. Hey, can I ask you something? You work for Elias, right? We've been getting some bodies that have been smiling. I continued, in a hushed tone. Have you seen them? Nope, haven't seen anything like that, the taller man replied, shaking his head. You happen to have Elias' phone number by any chance? The two men exchanged a glance. Sorry, can't do that, the shorter one said. But, why not? He is a very private person, the taller one said, rolling the cart down the ramp. Here you go, he said, cutting me off. Then the two men hurried back into the van. They quickly pulled out, sloshing rain everywhere, leaving me alone with the body. That was weird. Really weird. I'm onto something. Usually the people handling the delivery always roll the body into the morgue for us. Common courtesy in the funeral home world. But I'd spooked them with my questions about Elias. They didn't want me to know anything about him. I rolled the body down the hallway myself, the metal wheels clattering against the floor. I made a sharp right into the morgue, then called Alan to let him know. Before loading the body into the cabinet, I always did a quick check. Sometimes they got a little jostled in transit, and I wouldn't want to store the body with their face tilted to the side, for example. I unzipped the body bag. No, I recognized her. Mildred, the old woman that lived 2 floors down from me. I saw her all the time. She had a little yippy dog she would walk all the time. She'd talk to me when I got my mail. She even invited me over for tea one time when I was locked out of my apartment. Mildred was dead. And she was smiling. The same smile that all of them had, except this time it was twisting features that were familiar to me. A face that I knew. The floor spun underneath me. I leaned against the cabinet and held myself steady, a wave of nausea rolling through me. I forced my breathing to slow, in, out, in, out. I needed to calm down. All I needed to do was zip her up, get her in the cabinet, and leave. That's all I had to do. Then I'd be on my way home, to snuggling up in a blanket and watching TV. The phone rang. I picked it up on the 3rd ring. I jumped about a foot in the air, swearing. I stumbled out of the morgue and into Alan's office. Racing, the shrill sound pierced the silence. I'm coming, I muttered under my breath, my legs wobbly beneath me. Hello? Yes? Is this Moyna Funeral Home? The voice on the other end of the line asked. Hi, this is Dan with Meadow Services. I'm calling to schedule the delivery of Mildred Redacted. A pause. I frowned. What do you mean, schedule it? She was just delivered a few minutes ago. That's not possible. A creeping dread trickled down my back. We have her body right here, he said. We didn't make the delivery today because of the storm. My heart plummeted to the floor. What the fuck? No. There must be a mistake, I stuttered. We just got her. She's in the morgue right now. Maybe you're getting her confused with another delivery. It's fine, I told him, then hung up the phone. Black dots danced in my vision. I sat down in Alan's chair before I had the chance to faint. Can you just tell me if tomorrow afternoon is okay, ma'am? The voice said on the other line. No. This was the only delivery we were waiting for. My body went cold. My head spun. The realization came crashing down on me. John Ivanov, the mugging victim, with no bruises, the woman who weighed 97 pounds, the man's bones that burned up too fast in the crematory, and the smiles that kept reappearing, over and over. Unless, it didn't make sense. It was her body. What if the bodies? What if someone somewhere along the chain was trading out all the corpses for different ones? Clones? Replicas? Ones that were smiling, that kept smiling no matter how many times we set their features. Weren't the real bodies of the deceased? I pulled up our records and typed in a few names of smiling bodies that I remembered, like John Ivanov and Jasmine Thomas. My heart dropped when I saw all of them came from Everson Delivery Services. I ran out of the office, heart pounding in my ears. I ran into the morgue and froze. No. The body bag was zipped all the way down, and it was empty. Mildred's body was gone. Every fiber of my being was screaming at me. I ran over, hardly believing it. I unzipped the bag all the way and pressed my hands inside. as if a 180-pound woman could be hiding somewhere inside it. It was completely, totally empty. Get out. Get out. Now. I turned on my heel and ran down the hallway, sprinting towards the back door. I stopped dead in my tracks. Standing in the dark hallway, silhouetted by the glass door behind her, was the naked figure of Mildred. She stood perfectly still. Her dark eyes glinted. Her white hair fell in messy, scraggly curls over her face. Her skin hung loose on her body, her bare feet sticking to the linoleum floor beneath her. And she was smiling. Smiling that horrible, stretched grin. I whipped around and ran. Thunder rumbled behind me, rattling the glass. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my entire body shaking. I burst onto the first floor, ran to the front door, twisted the knob. No, Alan had locked up when you left. That included locking the front door with the deadbolt that only he had the key to. For a split second, I thought about going back downstairs, but then I heard it. Mildred's footsteps, coming up the stairs. What do? The footsteps got louder. I ran down the hallway and wrenched at one of the windows. But I was 2 stories up. The fall could kill me, especially since it wasn't grass beneath, but hard pavement. I swallowed. I have to hide. I have to create. Mildred had made it to the top of the stairs. I shot out of the hallway and into the nearest room. The showroom. About a dozen caskets and coffins stood before me. Of every shape and size. They glinted in the dim light, polished to perfection, alongside arrangements of fake flowers and easels displaying portraits of random people. I picked one at random, a heavy mahogany casket engraved with a cross, and climbed in. I gave the woman on the other line the address. Then I pulled the heavy lid back over me, lowering it as gently as I could so it wouldn't thunk shut. As soon as I was in total darkness, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. Please, I whispered, my words muffled in the soft, puffy cotton sides of the casket. Please help me. Thump. Then, all I could do was wait. I heard Mildred's footsteps enter the room. Every muscle in my body froze. My breath sounded incredibly loud, like it was being piped through a surround sound stereo. So I held my breath. But even my heartbeat, the rush of blood through my veins, sounded incredibly loud locked in this casket. Please don't find me. Please. Thump. The footsteps were getting progressively louder. I couldn't see anything. It was pure darkness, like I was buried in the earth itself. I began to panic. Why am I hiding here? If she finds me, I have no escape. I should have hid in a doorway or under the stairs so I could keep running, keep changing hiding spots. Thump. I held my breath, my entire body shaking. I always sucked at hide and seek. She was right there. Thump. And then the footsteps stopped. She seemed to have found the casket I was in. I could feel the heaviness of her presence, weighing down on the hot air of the casket itself, pressing down on me, smothering me. The casket lid opened. Mildred's face loomed over me. Her skin hung loosely over her skull. Her dark eyes twinkled, and her lips were stretched taut into that horrible grin. Then her mouth opened. Her mouth opened wider and wider, until her jaw unhinged completely. Within her throat, I could see 2 glittering black eyes, and the pale bluish flesh of a creature who has never seen the sun, just like the creature they found on Highview Lane. I thought dimly. The creature didn't infect people with a parasite. It is the parasite. For a second, I was paralyzed. Then I pulled my knees up to my chest and kicked at her as hard as I could. She lunged at me. My gaze caught on one of the enormous easels. Mildred staggered back. I scrambled out of the casket, the heavy lid scraping along my back, almost pinning me down, but I made my way out, fighting for my life, until I fell onto the floor. As soon as Mildred took a jerky, stumbling step forward, I thrust the leg into her open mouth. Of course, the creature in there didn't understand. I grabbed it and pointed one leg of it at her mouth. "Don't get any closer," I shouted. Sam's inhuman screech filled the room. I dropped the easel and ran down the stairs. I made it to the back door and burst through it, out into the storm. I stumbled towards the road, glancing back a final time. A torrent of rain fell onto me, soaking me. Thunder rumbled in the distance, cut with the sound of distant sirens. Mildred wasn't following. When the police broke into the building, they found Mildred's eviscerated body. It appeared to have just been a shell, completely hollowed out on the inside. As for the creature that was living inside of her, there was no sign of it. Sometimes I wonder if they actually captured it and took it off to some secret government compound for examination. Or so they said. Everson Delivery Services promptly went out of business. Elias skipped town and disappeared off the map completely. I wonder if he's really Elias at all, or if he's simply a meat suit, a shell, controlled by one of the alien creatures. I stared at the photo of the woman, glossy on the page. She had her hands together, like she was clapping, and her mouth was open in a shout of joy. Maybe it was just the low-quality ink the crappy paper tabloids use, but I thought I could see a strange glint at the back of her mouth, because a few weeks later, while I was in the checkout line, I saw the headline on a tabloid newspaper, "Wife comes back from the dead." I flipped open the magazine and skimmed the article. It claimed the woman had been dead for over 24 hours and spent the night in a funeral home. Maybe it was just my imagination. Whatever their plan, they were clever. The police never found where all the real dead bodies went, and the other 30 smiling corpses were sent to a lab for examination. The ones that had already been buried were exhumed. Sheriff Thompson told us it was a parasite, something in the water, highly contagious. The areas of clear water were cordoned off for decontamination. Highview Lane was evacuated. Maybe real human bodies are too full of bones and organs and blood to inhabit, so they build a replica based on the corpses of those who have died. Maybe their plan was always to animate those shells and come back into their grieving families' lives. Or maybe all of this was just practice, and maybe there are now shells walking around all over the place. Maybe they don't wait for the victims to die on their own anymore. Maybe these creatures lay in wait in alleyways and dark corners, ready to pick us off one by one and steal our lives. Alan and I set the body on the table in front of us, staring at each other. But I know the truth, because Alan and I kept one of the smiling corpses. The family had asked that he be cremated, and we gave them fake ashes instead. I know that's a horrible thing to do, except it isn't that horrible when you consider the remains weren't even his to begin with. "You ready?" he asked, his voice shaky. "I am," I replied. Alan sunk a scalpel into the dead man's chest. He peeled back the skin, and when I leaned forward, I almost threw up. Hosting a dinner party in a haunted house is really stressful. 0 tenths. Do not recommend. The dinner party was my idea, because I am a vain bitch. Carla and Edith may have the Harvard physicist husbands and gifted kids and lavish European vacations, but damn it, I was going to have something. And it ended up being a house. "When can we close?" "But I haven't shown you the attic yet," she protested. "There's something you should see up there." Did I buy this house knowing there was probably something wrong with it?
Yes. Did I care?
Not particularly. As soon as the realtor showed me the place, I knew I had to have it. Bless her heart, she was actually trying to be honest. "There might be a little water damage," she said, gesturing to the stain on the wall that was clearly in the shape of a woman's face. "No one's been in the basement for decades," she said, as a horrible thumping noise came down from below us. I replayed the fantasy in my head 100 times. My sisters' looks of shock as they walked up the front porch steps. I'd relived it more than any sexual fantasy. That's for sure. The look of their jaws dropping open, validating my existence, was downright orgasmic. "When can we close?" They're not going to believe their eyes. We moved in a rush. Isabel originally started out in the front bedroom, but the woman in the closet became a problem. A woman can't fit in there. I'd reassured her, but she explained to me that the woman folded herself up like a spider to fit. Jack didn't like his room either, complaining of the man that hangs from the ceiling and stares at me all night. I hadn't experienced anything in the owner suite, so I put the kids in there. I decided to sleep in Isabel's old room. A haunted woman sounded marginally better than a haunted man. You know how men can be, and things went okay after that. It was always a pain putting the chairs back every morning. No matter how we arranged them at night, they were always stacked on each other in the morning, so they reached the ceiling. There were other issues too, but for the most part, we were surviving. The day of the party, I couldn't sit still. I skittered around the house, straightening the tablecloth, arranging the flowers, Just so. Mommy, can I have one? Isabel asked, staring forlornly at the mini sandwiches I'd made on a multi-tiered plate. You can have one, I told her, moving to ruffle her hair, then stopping myself. Wouldn't want her to have messy hair when they arrived. I hesitated. Even one missing would throw off the symmetry of the whole thing, but I didn't want to be the bad mom. I suppose some people might argue that moving your kids into a haunted house is what a bad mom would do also. But, to each their own. Then I stationed myself right behind the door, staring out the peephole. 10 minutes later, I saw Carla's SUV pulling up, and a few minutes after that, Edith's. And boy, did their mouths drop open. I watched them walk up the steps. I desperately wished I could read lips as I watched Carla say something to Edith, gesturing at the porch. They're so pissed. This is awesome. Mom. Not now. Your aunts are here. But the sink's making blood again. And then I heard Jack giggling in the kitchen. I jumped back from the door. What? There's blood coming out of the faucet, she said plainly. Fuck, fuck, fuck. The doorbell rang, but I was sprinting away from the door, into the kitchen. Oh no, there was indeed blood coming out of the perfectly polished kitchen faucet. It splattered onto the quartz countertops, staining them red. And there was Jack, running his hands through it, the edges of his sleeves red, giggling like a madman. Jack! He turned around, still grinning. I turned off the sink. Tell Aunt Carla and Aunt Edith they'll be there in a second, I told Isabel, grappling with Jack, and do not let them in the house. Yes, Mommy. 10 minutes later, Jack and I were making it down the curved staircase, him in a new crisp white shirt, me with the faintest ghost of blood around my fingernails. Isabel, bless her little soul, was standing in the doorway talking up a storm with her aunts. I was lucky to have Isabel. She was a smart kid, smarter than me. Must have gotten it from her dad. And that's why poison dart frogs are poisonous, she was saying. It's what they're eating in the rainforest. Not a single frog in a zoo has ever been. They both silently stepped in. Whoa. Sam, Edith's boy, said. This isn't like what you described. I appeared behind her. Hi, I said, breathless. Sorry for the wait. Come on in. Sosh. Edith cut him off. Thank you, I replied. This is really nice, Carla said. But her voice was heavy, carrying, what? Jealousy? Suspicion? Maybe she thought I'd robbed a bank, or worse, become a crack dealer. Well, good. Let her dream up her little conspiracies. What? Carla's husband Jacob said, completely clueless and not reading the room, as he stepped in after. This is amazing. I didn't think you could have. He shut up and gave me an awkward grin. Kevin, Carla hissed. Come on in. I've got some hors d'oeuvres for you all. I ushered them into the dining room, where I kept the sandwiches. I quickly noticed a turkey and Swiss had a deep red fingerprint on it. Fuck. I grabbed it and stuffed it into my mouth hole. Well, fucking find out, won't we? I thought as I swallowed. Hope that blood doesn't carry any blood-borne diseases. A little voice sing-songed in my head. As long as I can keep everything under control for 2 hours. I thought they don't stay long. Edith's kids have a strict 8 o'clock bedtime. Jack sat at the table, kicking his legs, slowly unraveling his shirt as he pulled at a loose thread. Isabel stood next to me, absolutely motionless, surveying the scene. My eyes unconsciously flicked to the 3 deadbolts over the basement door, then the crack of darkness underneath the door. I swallowed. 2 hours. Right. We can do it for 2 hours. Little chef there, aren't ya? Carla said, shooting her a big grin. These are delicious, Edith said. Did you make them? I nodded. Isabel helped me. Okay, that was harsh. Of course, she cared about Isabel. But by the same token, I hadn't seen her rushing to babysit when Eric left, or bringing over lasagnas and brownies, or swinging by with Carrie and Colin for a playdate. Neither of them reached out a helping hand when we were groundless, boys on the water, drifting between schools and zip codes. Can we see the upstairs? Colin asked, with a big toothy grin. Like she even cared about my kid. Yeah, can we? Carrie asked. Oh man, Colin groaned. The woman in the closet flashed through my mind, sitting on the floor, crumpled in on herself. Her head upside down, black eyes glittering in the shadows. Sorry, No. It's really messy up there. First floor only, please. I shot a look at the deadbolts again. No basement either. Worcester moist. Then the creaking started. It started above us, in the far corner of the dining room, and then slowly moved to the opposite end. Edith's apathetic teenager, Sam, looked up from his phone for a second. Edith shot me a look. Someone else here. I shook my head. No, the house just settles a lot, is all. They'd been here 6 minutes. I glanced at the oven clock. 6 minutes. Okay, let's just establish some ground rules, I said hastily. Edith raised an eyebrow. Carla looked skeptical. No upstairs. No downstairs. Okay, we stay on this floor. And also, the kitchen sink has been having issues, so use the bathroom sink if you need to wash your hands. Fuck. Carla and Edith exchanged a look. Now the kids were staring at me too, eyes wide. Also, if anyone has any injuries, like injuries that draw blood, immediately go outside. Shit. I didn't have to say that. The chances that someone would draw blood in the next 1 hour, 53 minutes, were tiny. I could have just hung on to that rule and waited, and only said it if someone actually hurt themselves. Now Carla and Edith are looking at me like I'm crazy. No, not crazy. They're looking at me like they think I'm hiding something. Let me get the food ready, I said, clearing my throat. Give me a sec. Like a mold problem, or a bat problem, or something was disappeared into the kitchen. I'd picked up some chickens from Boston Market and put them in the oven to warm up. I walked over, grabbed the oven door. What had been staring out at me was not a well-seasoned bird, but a woman's head, skin crispy and eyes charred. Fuck. I quickly slammed it shut. Why the fuck did you use the oven? I scolded myself. You know this happens sometimes. You know this. It's Rosemary, I whispered back. Mom, are you okay? Isabel whispered behind me. Oh, I know how to get rid of her. She walked over to the salt pig and grabbed a pinch of kosher salt. Without looking, she cracked the oven door open and threw the salt in. I heard a sizzling sound that almost sounded like a shriek, and when I looked in the oven, the birds were back. Wow, how'd you figure that one out? I whispered. When you were at work late, a few weeks ago, Jack was hungry. I cooked a pizza, but she was there. Salt repels ghosts, so I tried that. Sage does too, but it only made her really mad. Wow, she was so smart for a 13-year-old. I donned the oven mitts and pulled the birds out. Got all the other side dishes out. Okay, let's eat, I called, my heart pounding in my chest. 1 hour, 47 minutes left. This is delicious, Carla said. How'd you season it? Isabel began to giggle. I shot her a smile. Oh, just the usual. Sage, garlic, rosemary. Things seemed to be going okay. No one had mentioned Eric yet. No one had tried to use the kitchen sink, and the piles of teeth hadn't started appearing. Maybe things would go okay. 1 hour, 13 minutes left. A loud thump came from upstairs. Carla stopped chewing and looked up. You have mice or something? She asked. Sounds like an animal, she said, stabbing at her chicken. Could be a raccoon. Raccoons can transmit rabies, you know. You should get someone out here to take a look. Nope, I replied. Not mice. No, you're not. You're trying to tear down this house because you're jealous. My heart twinged. After everything I've done, you're trying to take it away from me. Okay, Carla said. Just trying to help. It's not a raccoon. Yeah. She was so weird about that. I could picture Carla saying, what's she trying to hide so bad? A dead body. Edith said nothing, but I could tell she was thinking something. She kept shooting Carla conspiratorial glances. No doubt they'd be having an hour phone conversation tonight, sorting through every detail of the evening, picking it apart, and she wouldn't even let us go upstairs. I could picture Edith saying, it's got to be bad, maybe black mold, or water damage. Well, yeah, sort of. I stabbed at my chicken, trying not to think of Rosemary's blistered skin, and ate it. With each bite, I got madder and madder. To moved on to other topics. Now Edith's vacation to France. But obviously they were still thinking about me, thinking about this house, thinking about how Eric left me, thinking about what idiot doesn't sniff out an affair for 2 years. Wait, I said, looking up from my food. Where's Sam? Thinking they'd never buy this house. It wasn't good enough for them either, with its black mold rabid raccoons dismembered woman in the attic. Thinking of all the coke I must have sold to buy this house. Whoa. He went to use the bathroom upstairs, Edith said. Jacob's in the one down here. My heartbeat skyrocketed. I said no one. Upstairs, I snarled. A metallic thunk came from upstairs. Yeah, but he had to use the bathroom, Edith said. Why are you acting so odd, anyway? This entire dinner you've been. I didn't wait for Edith to finish her thought. I bounded up the stairs 2 at a time. As I got to the top, I saw that the bathroom door was closed, and there was a thin layer of water seeping out from under the crack in the door and into the hallway. Fuck. I ran over to the door, tried the handle. It was locked, like someone trying to talk underwater. Sam, I shouted. Sam, can you hear me? A gurgling noise came from the other side. I felt above the doorframe for the key, hand shaking. I put it into the tiny hole in the doorknob. My hands shook as I maneuvered it, trying to get the door to unlock. I was so bad at this, it was so hard to get it perfectly positioned. Click. I burst into the bathroom. It was flowing over the sides of the bathtub, which was mostly obscured by the shower curtain. The green tile floor was covered in water. Poking out from the edge of the shower curtain, though, I could see 2 things. I'm writing this from a hospital room. My little boy is fine now, but that thing could have killed him. I think there's something haunting my son. I need help getting rid of it. Let me start at the beginning. Anyway, 2 weeks ago, that night, as usual, I was putting my 6-year-old son Noah to sleep. For the past 2 weeks, something has been haunting my son. It could first started earlier than that, but that was the first time I noticed it. I will say that, strangely, this also coincides with when my son got a few stitches for a cut on his hand. He fell off monkey bars. I'm not sure that's actually relevant to what's happening here, but I figured I'd mention it, in the off chance anyone has any ideas. Noah struggles to fall asleep. Like, a lot. So the bedtime routine is the same each night. I read stories and talked to him for about a half hour. Then I close the door and sit in the hallway waiting for him to sleep. If I don't sit right outside his door, he comes out of the room and starts playing. If I stay in the room with him, he keeps talking and talking and talking. After reading for about 20 minutes outside his door, it got quiet. I took the opportunity to go downstairs and clean up a bit. When I came back up, however, he wasn't asleep. I could hear him giggling, talking to himself. I couldn't make out individual words, but he definitely wasn't asleep. This seemed like a happy medium. Noah was fast asleep, curled in the fetal position under the covers. I stopped. I angrily yanked the door open. Noah. In fact, I forgot all about it, until the cabinet incident. Now, this wasn't totally weird. Sometimes my son talks to himself right up to the moment he falls asleep. Sometimes he even babbles to himself in the middle of the night. So it was a little odd, but it didn't raise any red flags with me. Yet, I was putting on dinner when I heard the drawer push open, the metallic rolling sound as it popped out. Oh, is it the poltergeist? I said with a laugh. The drawer pulled shut. Noah and his little sister Zoe have this game they play. I don't even remember how it started, but basically, one of them hides in a kitchen cabinet and pushes the door or drawer out a little bit, and they say they're a poltergeist. I set down the knife and walked over to the cabinet, crouching in front of it. Sometimes I could see Noah's eyes in the gap between the counter and the drawer, staring back at me. I smiled and waited for the drawer to pop open. After a few seconds, it slowly rolled out on its hinges. I saw Noah's hand curled around the top edge of the drawer in the darkness as he pushed it open. I see you, I cooed. I don't think that's really a poltergeist, but I didn't hear his laughter. Didn't see his dark eyes looking back at mine. Hey, don't do it so hard. You could smash your fingers. The hand darted out of sight, and then, snap, the drawer closed hard as if he'd yanked it back with all his might. He didn't respond. Just then, footsteps sounded behind me. Noah. I turned around. Noah was standing behind me, a foam Minecraft sword dangling from his hand. A second later, Zoe appeared, out of breath, holding a pickaxe. "Found you," she squealed, whacking him in the shoulder. "I'm hungry." I turned back to the cabinet. It was empty. Threw the door open. I glanced from Noah to Zoe to the empty cabinet, the explanation clear but my brain lagging 10 seconds behind. "Were you just in the cabinet?" I asked, but I knew there was no way he could be. No way he could have teleported from the cabinet to the kitchen behind me. "No," he said. "No, I wasn't." "Zoe." I stared at the empty cabinet. Someone was in there. I saw their hand. I saw their fucking hand. But it was impossible. There was just one explanation, then, that I'd imagined it. And there was no way they could be escaped without me noticing. The doctor thought it was probably just the darkness, and the fact that I expected to see a hand there, so he sent me on my way, not too concerned. I decided to see a doctor. I had never had full-blown hallucinations before, but I'd had weird stuff in my vision, sometimes, like seeing a sparkling bit of light, or patches of static from an old TV set, or thinking the hair in my eyes was a shadow person staring at me. I'd definitely gone down the doctor, Google rabbit hole a few times, looking up things like Charles Bonnet syndrome and visual snow syndrome. I probably wouldn't have been too concerned either, except things continued to happen. At 2 a.m., I was woken up by the sound of hurried, pattering footsteps. It sounded exactly like Noah or Zoe running back and forth across the length of our house, downstairs. I got out of bed and immediately checked on them. They were in their beds, fast asleep. I locked myself in the kids' rooms, with my phone poised to dial 911, while Dave checked it out. But after turning on all the lights and checking every room and nook and cranny, he told me nothing was there. I ran back in and woke my husband Dave. "There's someone out there," I whispered, my legs shaking. I heard them, downstairs. Maybe one of them just got up to use the bathroom. "Well, I dunno, Carmen. I checked everywhere. No one's in here, and all the doors are locked." I didn't sleep until the first rays of dawn shone through the window. "It was downstairs, Dave. And then there was the incident in the bedroom 3 days ago. And there were other weird things. In the morning, I kept finding the kids' nightlight on the floor, even though both of them are afraid of the dark and wouldn't unplug it. The clothes in their closet kept getting all shifted and rearranged, like someone was pushing the hangers back and forth, making gaps here and there in the hanging shirts, like they were looking for something in particular. At that point in time, I'd figured the kids or Dave did it, but obviously now I'm not so sure. Over the next 10 days, that happened several times. Me waking up to the sound of what was clearly children's footsteps, running back and forth downstairs, back and forth, back and forth. A few times when I went down to check, I found the drawer of the poltergeist cabinet rolled out too. I was sitting out in the hallway as usual, waiting for Noah to fall asleep. Zoe was already fast asleep, but Noah was still talking to himself. The muffled voice on the other side followed a pattern. It was a bunch of syllables, and then it raised in pitch. I looked up from my phone, and I suddenly realized something. Like Noah was asking a question, over and over and over. The same question. Usually his babbling is random Star Wars storylines and stuff like that, not questions. I put my phone down and strained my ears to listen. Why? Have no? Why? Have no? Those were the only 3 words I could make out. Why do you have no face? I twisted the knob, as silently as I could, and pushed the door open a crack. I heard Noah suck in a breath, and then ask the question. My blood ran cold. I shot up and ran into the bedroom. "Who are you talking to?" I demanded, flicking on the light and sweeping the room. "No one," he said, timidly. I turned around, just in time to see the clothes hanging in his closet moving. I could tell he was lying, like something had just disappeared within them. I stared at the aisle end cap display of glittery disco ball letters. Someone keeps rearranging the letters in the craft store I work at. It's starting to get creepy. Someone had lovingly rearranged the letters to spell out, "Oh fuck. Bob's. Dick." I rearranged the letters, grumbling all the while. Then I walked away, muttering curses to myself, pushing the dust mop over the aisle floor. I was the only one in the store, and this had to get done before I closed up, or I'd be yelled at. We had a militaristic boss who checked the security camera tapes like a psycho. 1 word per shelf, in that order, like they purposely made them go from less obscene to more obscene. The only shelf they didn't touch was the one that was half covered by the advertisement that read 50% off disco letters. It wasn't worth the effort, I guess, if no one was going to see it. Teenagers, I growled under my breath. I didn't want to sound curmudgeon-y, but damn, it was 15 minutes till closing, and I had a family to get home to. A little girl who stayed up past her bedtime just to hug me goodnight. When you're young, everything's so fucking funny. They never think of the consequences. When I went into aisle 32, however, there was another one. Flaccid. Okay, I had to give them points for creativity on this one. Wed mostly sold out of these oversized gold party letters. There were only 10 left. It took a lot of creativity to form an obscene word out of 10 letters. I rescrambled the letters and continued through the store. When I got to aisle 44, however, where we keep the wooden paintables, like birdhouses and the like, someone had rearranged the wooden letters into words. Kudos, honestly. Just 1 word. Not obscene. Help. I froze, staring at the letters. Well, that was disconcerting. That had to be another joke, right? Trying to give someone a scare. Well, they succeeded. I glanced around the store, and even crouched to check the space under the aisle shelves. No one was there, of course. I stood back up and continued pushing the dust mop. 9:03. Fuck. I had to hurry it up and close up. I went on mopping through the aisles as quickly as I could. When I got to the baking aisle, and my eyes fell on the cookie cutter letters, I knew there was going to be another word or message waiting. Then there was. The cookie cutters had been balanced upright, reading, "Shut up," I told myself, pushing the mop faster. It's just a bunch of teenagers trying to scare people. Obscenities and creepy messages. This screams of 14-year-old boys who watched a horror movie once. Watching you. All the blood drained out of my face. I took something from the forest. Now, it wants to take something from me. I thought it wasn't a big deal. My son is on a rock collecting kick. Well, collecting is being generous. He's just digging up the most random, boring, uninteresting rocks and putting them in a box. I've offered to buy him a collection of gemstones or whatever, but apparently the act of digging them up is the whole point. Our backyard looks worse than when our dog, Sadie, dug up everything that one summer. Holes everywhere. Well, today, Ben wanted to bring his shovel to the local state park and dig up some. I wasn't sure if it was legal to take rocks from a state park. It probably wasn't, but we weren't taking things of value. You know? It's not like we were panning for gold or digging up fossils. We were just stealing average, completely uninteresting rocks. We hiked out about half a mile on the main trail, then spent an hour filling up his backpack with rocks. It was good for us to get exercise, to be out in the fresh air. As we started for the parking lot, however, I had a weird feeling. Maybe it was just the heavy backpack digging its straps into my shoulder, but I felt a sort of weight pressing down on me, a random anxiety out of nowhere. It was difficult to describe. It didn't quite feel like a panic attack, or impending doom, or being watched. It felt sort of like a cross between the three. Like something was just wrong. Like the natural order of things was disturbed. A disturbance in the force, if you will. But that was ridiculous. It would be bad, ecologically, to take dumpster truckloads of soil from the forest to use in your garden, or cut down a whole bunch of trees. But to take a small backpack full of rocks from a 100-plus acre state park, how bad could that be, really? Depends on who you ask, I thought, as we hiked uphill. To the grubs and the microbes who lived under that rock, very bad. To the rest of the forest, unnoticeable. There followed Ben's little form up the hill, panting now. The trees stretched up around me. I turned back to see the empty forest, the babbling brook, the trail winding behind a hill. It just felt wrong, like I was bringing bad luck on us, or something. I shook the thought out of my mind. We made it to the car, and I hauled the backpack inside. Then we drove out of the parking lot. In the middle of the road stood a deer. It stared at us with its dark eyes, unmoving. The road was narrow, so I couldn't go around it without risking hitting it. I pressed the horn for a second, letting out the tiniest beat to startle it. An ear twitched. I've never seen a deer this close before, Ben shouted from the back seat. It looked like it was silently judging me. I lay on the horn harder. The deer finally moved, and slowly made its way across the road. We woke up sick the next day. Those fucking Lowrys, I told my husband. They're always sick. The kids had a play date 2 days ago. No doubt that's where we picked it up. Ben stayed home from school. We set up cartoons in the family room. Lots of blankets. I brought my laptop over to try to get some work done. Even though I was feeling pretty bad myself, my husband left for work. Colds for me always start with a sore throat. But this one felt different. I was getting chills. My eyes were watery. I was stuffed up. And every so often I'd get a sudden wave of nausea. How are you feeling, buddy? I asked. Nauseous? Tired? He nodded, looking pretty bad. A few minutes later, another one of the nausea waves hit. I started for the bathroom, then redirected as I realized I wasn't going to make it. I vomited in the sink. The awful, projectile kind, where your entire body is convulsing and you can do anything to stop it. More and more vomit. Tears ran down my cheeks. And then, as I was coughing, I felt something strange coming up my throat. Something solid. Like I'd swallowed a stone. Before I could fully process it, my body convulsed, and the thing shot out of my mouth. It looked like some sort of vegetative matter, sitting in the bottom of the sink. The convulsions stopped. I grabbed a paper towel and wet it, wiping down my face. I reached out and poked the mass. It stuck together, like it hadn't been digested at all. I flipped it over, and it was dark brown on the bottom, an earthy smell, like soil after a rain, mixed with the acrid smell of vomit. What the hell? Last night, I'd had a salad. I'd had half of a bagel today before the nausea started. Neither of those things could really describe what I saw in the sink, unless I somehow hadn't digested the salad well. But then it would look like lettuce. This looked almost like moss. I rinsed it down, drank some water, and went back out to Ben. He looked like he was about to fall asleep. Feeling a little better, I sat down at the laptop and tried to get some work done. In the hazy gray of pre-dawn, a deer stood in our backyard. It was a buck, stately antlers attached to its head, piercing the mist. Don't deer only have antlers in the fall? I thought vaguely, still half asleep. Ben had woken up and I'd measured out some kid's Advil for him. Now he was settling back to sleep, and I had nothing to do but look out the window. I didn't want to use my phone and let the blue light wake me up. I watched as the deer stood there, motionless. We'd only had deer in our backyard a few times before. I knew they were crepuscular, active at dawn and dusk, so I guess this guy was looking for breakfast or something. But then he moved, and I realized just how wrong I was. He started walking towards the woods, but everything about his movements was wrong. It almost reminded me of a bipedal creature, forced to walk on all fours, his rump higher than his shoulders, his back legs too long, bent too much, awkwardly hobbling towards the woods. I ran over to the window, but it was still so dark out. The deer slowly ambled to the woods, spindly two long legs bending weirdly. My stomach turned. Nothing about this looked right. Then he disappeared. It took me a long time to fall asleep after that. How are you feeling? Terrible. I told my husband, drinking some hot tea. The sore throat had now kicked in, and it felt like I could barely swallow. Ben actually seemed to be doing a bit better than me today. He was able to make it out of bed, and was sitting on the rug, playing with his cars. Ben seems better. I know. Thank God for that. I guess it makes sense you feel worse, he said, gesturing to me. How's the nausea? A little better. Then I told him about the deer, but it was hard to describe how weird it looked with words. The dread I felt in my stomach while I watched it. It was probably injured, and limping or something, he replied. Or maybe it had that, what is it, chronic wasting disease, where the deer look like zombies. I guess that made sense. By midday I was vomiting again. This time, something slimy and long dribbled out of my mouth. I pulled at it to find a long yellowed fiber, like a strand of long grass. The seed head was broken open, and a black fungus bloomed over it. It was time to call a doctor. Do you have any history of pica, eating non-food items? Like the grass you described in your vomit. I shook my head. Do you sleepwalk? Not that I know of. Normally I wouldn't be that concerned. But, given your condition, he trailed off with a half smile. I'll get in touch with your doctor. He continued asking me questions, but nothing was really leading anywhere. I'd brought the piece of grass with me, in a baggie, and he looked at it. Food contamination, Piseka, while sleepwalking. Random things brought up that I knew weren't right. Something terrible was going on. And it had to do with those fucking rocks. The deer. The vomiting. We had taken something from the forest, and it was retaliating. I wasn't a superstitious person. Maybe it was my sleep deprivation, and how awful I was feeling, and my current brain fog. But I became obsessed with the thought that it was the rocks doing this. We'd upset the natural balance. We'd angered something. They were worthless to us, but valuable to the forest. After Ben fell asleep, I bagged up all the rocks and drove out to the edge of the woods. My husband offered to come with me, but I refused, saying I was just getting some milk at the Quick Mart. I didn't want him to think I was crazy. I hauled the rocks into the car and drove to the state park. The main entrance was closed for the night, of course, but the forest extended right to the edge of the road. I pulled over on the shoulder and hauled the bag out of the car, dropping it onto the curb. I zipped the bag open, and one by one began hurling the rocks into the woods. There were 7 in total. 1. I heard the rocks soaring through the air, breaking branches with it. Snap, snap, then a thwack as it landed on the ground. 2. This was a big one, but I was able to lift it a few feet off the ground and sort of toss it a few feet beyond the tree line. It made a heavy clunk sound as it, presumably, collided with another rock on the ground. 3. This one was small, and I gave it a wicked pitch, sailing through the air. Snap, snap. Then, nothing. I stood there, confused. It shouldn't have met the ground that soon, unless it hit something. Zizadib. Something sailed past my ear. Thwack. The rock ID thrown in moments before whizzed past my ear, hit the side of my car, and dropped to the ground. I stared at it, my heart pounding. Someone's out there. Oh no, no. Snapping branches, growing louder and louder. I dove back into the car and slammed the door shut. The engine revved and I pulled away from the curb, leaving the backpack full of rocks where it sat. I swerved onto the road. A deer came bounding out of the woods, lit in harsh white light from my headlights. It stumbled out awkwardly, like it was meant to stand on 2 legs, just like the one I'd seen in our backyard. The hind legs were too long, twisted and bent, and the steps it took were clumsy and uncoordinated. I hit the brakes. The deer stared back at me with unblinking black eyes. But the more I looked at it, the less it looked like a deer. The proportions were all wrong. The eyes were too big. The snout was too long. The legs were bent weirdly, to accommodate being on all 4s. Even the antlers split, and then rejoined again, completely different from a normal deer's antlers. I should have just swerved around it, but I found myself staring, mesmerized, as it pulled itself onto 2 legs. At its full height, it stood around 8 feet tall, face outside the scope of my headlights, fur glinting in the moonlight. I gave them back. I screamed. I gave the rocks back. Not like I expected this thing to actually understand me. Unfortunately, I don't know what happened over the next 5 minutes. I was staring at it, and then I was speeding home through the darkness. I don't remember swerving around the deer. I don't remember if it tried to attack or stop me. I was staring at it, and then suddenly, I was speeding home. Horrible, sharp pain needled my abdomen. I let out a half scream as I stomped on the gas pedal harder, careening down the country road. The next day later, the bleeding started. I was having a miscarriage, and as I sobbed on the floor of my bathroom, I couldn't help but think that thing had made things even. I'd taken from the forest, so it took something from me. I found bloody tire tracks in my driveway. If we had a normal asphalt driveway instead of a concrete one, I probably wouldn't have even noticed it. But the bloody tire tracks stood out starkly against the pale concrete, and they were clearly coming from my vehicle. I froze in place. The golden light from the garage spilled out from behind me, illuminating them. They were dark and thick at the end of the driveway, fading to pale pink as they got to the garage. I must have hit something. I swallowed. I hated hitting animals. In fact, I'd only hit one animal in my entire life. A squirrel that ran under the tires before I could even blink. The blood was so fresh and dark at the end of the driveway. I must have just hit it on our road. I crouched to the ground, my heart pounding, fearing I see the mangled body of some poor raccoon or something stuck to my tires. But there was nothing, just the blood. I walked down to the bottom of the driveway and glanced around, turning on my phone's flashlight, but I didn't see anything, just the empty street dotted with cars, lights glimmering on the houses across the street, people moving inside as they got ready for dinner. I looked down at the thick, fresh, shiny blood imprinted on the concrete. Maybe it's paint or a puddle of discolored water? I finally went inside, somewhat unnerved, said a quick hi to my husband, and started heating up dinner for myself. I watched the bowl twirl in the microwave, but I wasn't relaxed. The longer I thought about it, the more it didn't make sense. My husband and I had hit animals before, and we'd never made tire tracks of blood before. I mean, did a squirrel or raccoon even have that much blood? Maybe it wasn't an animal. Maybe it was a person. No, I pushed the thought out of my head. That's ridiculous. I couldn't run over someone without even realizing. But my eyes aren't on the road 100% of the time. I never check my phone, but I have to use the stupid touchscreen to adjust the heat. What if someone ran out while I was adjusting it? What if I ran them over without noticing? What if it was a child? No. There is no way I wouldn't have noticed hitting a person. Even if it was a child, I would felt a bump. I would fiend something. I would V. You okay? Dave asked, walking into the kitchen. Yeah, I muttered. Your food's been done for a while, and you've just been staring at the microwave. There's blood on my tires for some reason. His eyebrows raised. For some reason, I guess I hit an animal or something. But it couldn't have been far from the house, because the blood would worn off by then. But I don't see any animal out there. It's really weird. That is weird, he said. We faded into silence. I ate some, but it still bothered me. What if I hit someone and it didn't kill them? What if they're crying for help right now, half alive, and they're going to die unless I get them help? Someone else would hear them, right? I would hear them, right? Give me a second, I said, getting up and walking towards the garage. Okay, sure. I walked back out to the driveway. The blood was still there, shining gold in our outside lights, but duller now as it began to dry. I swallowed. That's a lot of blood. If it is blood at all. Okay, just shut up, get in the car, and drive. I backed out of the driveway and slowly drove down our street. If I did hit something, it wasn't far. The blood would worn off the tires before I pulled into the driveway. If it were far, it had to be somewhere on our street. If it even happened at all. I drove slowly down our street, high beams on. I scanned every nook and cranny that the headlights barely reached, shadows pooling under cars, a pile of leaves and sticks. I didn't see anything. Maybe you hit an opossum, or something, and maybe a fox already came by and snatched it for dinner. We did have a lot of foxes. That was the most likely thing. But then, wouldn't I see a blood smear on the road? But the road was dark, so maybe not. Either way, there was no half-dead person crying for help in the middle of the road, so my mind was at ease. I sighed and pulled back into the driveway. You didn't hit anything. Everything's okay. Everything's fine. I was so distracted in my own thoughts that I pulled into the driveway crooked. Sighing, I put the car in reverse to fix it. No, in my backup camera. There was a dark, tangled mass at the end of the driveway. Pale limbs, dark hair, contorted in a way that looked wrong. Dark, shiny liquid seeped from the person's abdomen. No. I just drove there. That wasn't there. It wasn't. I blinked, and it was gone. I sat there for a minute, my entire body shaking. Then I put the car in park and slowly crept towards the end of the driveway, peering around the edge of the car. My legs were weak underneath me. I clung to the side of the car like a mountain climber clings to the side of a mountain, every step feeling like I would tumble down and never get up. I got closer, closer, closer. Nothing was there. The driveway was empty. No person. Just the same bloody tire tracks from when I first pulled in. I leaned against the side of the car, relief flooding me, my legs almost giving way. Just my imagination. It looked like a woman, with white clothes and dark hair, tangled and crumped, bent unnaturally. My mind barely able to tell what exact position she'd been in. But I'd misinterpreted what I saw. Maybe a trash bag or some leaves blew by, and my brain, in its panicked state, said it was a woman who'd been run over. Because I was staring at that spot, the spot where she'd been lying. Right now, there was absolutely nothing there. I finally turned around and made my way towards the front of the car. But as I took a step, I saw it, on the concrete, clear as day. Hair, a lock of dark hair, poking out from underneath the car. No, it can't be. I lowered myself, inch by inch. It's just a stick, dead grass, something. My heart pounded so hard I saw stars. I leaned down, but I still couldn't see if anything was under the car. I got down on my hands and knees, and took a deep breath. I can't do this. Oh God, please, let there be nothing there. My arms and legs shook. I stared at the lock of hair, just a few inches from my hands. Not sticks, not leaves, hair. Please, no. I pressed my cheek to the concrete and looked under the car. A woman stared back at me. No. Her hand shot out and yanked me under. The concrete scraped my back. The metal chassis of the car bit into me, but she was so strong. In seconds I was staring up at the dark metal underbelly of the car, claws digging into my arm. I was screaming. My screams sounded so small under the car. And that's when I realized I was alone. The woman was gone. I was lying flat on my back, under the car, alone. Squelch. I turned, the concrete painfully scraping my scalp. I could see two pale, blood-soaked feet in the gap between the car and the driveway, like the woman was just standing there next to the car. Then she turned and walked away. Squelch, squelch, squelch. Seconds later, my husband came barreling out of the house. He helped me out from under the car, absolutely panicked. What happened? He kept asking, but I didn't have a good answer. I almost think I imagined it. If it weren't for the bloody bare footprints staining the concrete, fading to pink as they meandered into our garage. I don't think I've ever run over anyone, but how can I know for sure? Only one side of my face is aging. When I got my first gray hairs, they were only on the left side of my head. It was a little weird, sure, but since it was only a few hairs, I chalked it up to randomness. But then a few months later, as I was getting ready for a dinner party, I noticed something else. There were only fine lines under my left eye. The skin under my right eye was perfectly smooth. Everyone has a good side and a bad side, I thought. I guess my right is my good side. But as I looked at my face more closely, I noticed more differences. I had a slight jowl on my left jawline, laugh lines, more gray hairs. Yet on my right, I looked like I was 25 years old. Not a single gray hair. Not a single wrinkle. Hair shiny and thick. I brought it up with my doctor, even asking about a stroke, but he claimed he couldn't see a difference between the sides of my face. Besides, I had no facial paralysis, and a stroke wouldn't affect the distribution of gray hair on my head. I brought it up with my husband John too. He also said he couldn't tell the difference, but offered an interesting theory. Maybe your skin is more sun damaged on the left because you drive so much, though that wouldn't explain the hair. When I got out of the shower, I stared at my naked body. It looked like the aging thing wasn't just my face. My left boob was saggier. The cellulite on my left thigh cut deeper. Now that I noticed it, I couldn't unsee it. I looked totally asymmetric, like someone had taken half of a 35-year-old and half of a 25-year-old and stitched them together. I told my friends and my parents, and they also insisted they couldn't see what I was talking about. But to me, it was obvious. Weird thoughts seeped into my head that night. The right side of your face looks better than it did in your early 30s. It's restoring itself, like you're a vampire or something. Some weird magical force is doing this. And there is payment, a sacrifice. You just don't know what it is yet. Youth is never free. I started researching online. I found an urban legend about a man who had the same issue. Half his face didn't age, because he stuck his head in a particle accelerator and got hit with a proton beam. Anatoly Bugorsky, for anyone curious. Photos, however, didn't show an appreciable difference in the sides of his face. I began to feel like the right side of my body, the perfect preserved young one, wasn't even part of me anymore. Like it was a growth, a tumor, a parasitic twin, like it didn't belong. When I looked in the mirror, a fantasy would play in my head, grabbing the kitchen knife and slicing myself in two, watching the right half of my body crawl across the blood-stained tile, down the stairs, and out into the darkness, never to be seen again. A few weeks later, just when I started getting complacent, thinking maybe John and parents and friends were right, it happened. The right side of my face moved independently for the first time. I was brushing my hair in front of the mirror when I blinked, except only one eye blinked. What? I closed my eyes, but my right eye remained open, staring blankly back at me in the mirror. No. I panicked. I did a series of expressions and movements. When I lifted my arms over my head, walked, moved my body, everything still worked as normal, but my right eye wouldn't cooperate. John rushed me to the ER. He thought I was having a stroke, but I had a horrible feeling whatever this was, the doctors couldn't fix. I closed my eyes as we drove to the hospital, trying to rest, but my right eye remained open. The road scrolling by through the window looked fuzzy and flickery, like my brain was only getting intermittent signals from it. A dying connection. I can see right out of this eye, I told him. The engine vroomed in response as he pressed on the gas. Soon I was in a hospital room, nurses flocking around me, then doctors, pressing and probing and prodding. I just wanted to go home. I just wanted my face to look the same on both sides. I just wanted everything to be back to normal. The doctors here insisted they didn't see a difference either, but at my insistence, they took tissue samples from both sides of my face. An hour later, a new doctor came in. I could feel the concern radiating off of him. He had bad news. I was sure of it. He told me, with forced calm, what the results were. The cells on the left side of my body were normal, aging at an appropriate rate. The cells on the right side of my body were in stasis. They resembled cells that were clinically frozen, like embryos for IVF, alive, but not functioning, frozen in time. What would cause something like that? I stuttered. I don't know. To be honest, I've never seen anything like it. Is it dangerous? I don't know. We spent the night in the hospital, with the doctors running more tests, taking more samples. Finally, not making any headway and not seeing a clear danger, they let us go home. John and I talked about it at length. We didn't know what to do. Tomorrow I'd be calling down the list of specialists the ER doctor had given me. I love you, he said, wrapping his arms around me. I love you too. I closed my eyes, but my right eye stayed open, watching the bedroom flicker in and out of darkness like a dying bulb. I woke with a start at 3 a.m. I tried to roll over, but realized I couldn't. My arm was stuck on something. I yanked hard, starting to panic. Had John rolled on my arm or something? What's going on? My eyes adjusted to the darkness, and then I saw exactly what was wrong. My right arm stretched out in the darkness, and my right hand was locked around John's throat. His eyes stared up at the ceiling, blank and lifeless. I could remember how I met my best friend. Kaylee has been my best friend for as long as I can remember. For me, that's not a figure of speech. I literally can't remember how I met her. I can't find any photos of me with her before 3rd grade, so I guess I met her around then. Strangely though, she's not in any of my class photos. I remember her coming over my house all the time, but I don't ever remember going to hers. These things never struck me as weird until a few days ago, when I really sat down and thought about them. Some things in life you just sort of accept as fact, right? They've gone on so long, you don't remember how they started. Like how I always put eggs on the top shelf of the fridge, or how I always tuck my blanket under my feet before going to bed. I don't remember how it started. I've just always done it that way, as long as I can remember. So how did I meet her? I don't remember. They say, if you lose your sight, you don't see pitch black, or nothingness, or a void. You just have the absence of sight. That's how it is for me with Kaylee. There's no remnant of a memory, nothing on the tip of my tongue. It just isn't there. A few days ago, I asked her about it. Do you remember how we met? What do you mean? She asked, her smile faltering. Well, we met when I was around 8, right? But you went to a different school. So, how did we meet? It was at that summer camp, wasn't it? She asked. With the bottle rockets? I don't think so. I'd only gone one summer, and I was pretty sure that was the summer after 4th grade. Church, then. Which church? Kayleigh paused. The one off Main Street, with the steeple. Which one? Oh, I'm not sure. You know I'm not religious, she said with a laugh. The one on the corner, or on Elm Street? She paused. Elm, I think. Well, my parents took me to St. Paul's on the corner, I said. So it couldn't have been church. Huh? She said, shrugging. Then I don't know how we met. It was weird. She seemed confused, and yet it almost felt like she was playing the role of a fortune teller, throwing out vague answers and hoping I'd jump in with more details. So you don't remember how we met? I said with finality. I guess I don't. She shook her head, her bleach blonde hair shaking around her face. Isn't that silly? We've been best friends for 10 years, and we can't even remember how we met. I wanted to ask her more, but then my roommate got home, and my roommate is a bit persnickety, so we decided to quietly watch a movie in my room to give her some peace. It seemed weird to bring up again. I was probably overthinking things. That night, however, I couldn't sleep. As Kayleigh slept peacefully on the futon in the common area, I lay wide awake in my bed. Why can't I remember? And then a thought occurred to me. Someone else must remember. I went on Facebook and clicked over to our 21 mutual friends. I started scrolling, making a mental list of who was most likely to know. But then, a sudden realization hit me. Each of these friends, I'd introduced to her. None of these were her friends originally. They were all mine. I squinted at the screen. How does that make sense? Has she really never introduced me to her friends? And now that I thought about it, she was always visiting me at my dorm, making the 2-hour drive. She offered, because I was broke and couldn't afford the gas. But maybe there was more to it than that. Why had I never thought about this before? I scrolled back through my Facebook photos to some childhood photos I'd posted. Kayleigh was in them, sure as day. She looked different. Her hair wasn't bleached then. Her face was chubbier, but from the dimples to the sharp chin, it was her. I clicked back on her Facebook page and scrolled, and that's when I realized something. Every single post involved me or one of our 21 mutual friends. I didn't see a single tag by someone I didn't know. Well, that could be the privacy settings, couldn't it? Like her friends who've tagged her, have made the post only visible to their friends or mutuals, or something. But not a single post? It was like her entire life revolved around me, like every single event in her life was related to me, directly or indirectly. I gave up on sleep. I got out of bed and walked into the common room, grabbing a Coke from the mini fridge. Kayleigh was sleeping soundly on the futon. I glanced over at her, my heart pounding. Her pale skin was blue in the light from the microwave clock. Muffled music came from my roommate's room. She was still up, with my mind racing and no one else to talk to. I went over. Can I come in for a second? I called quietly through the door. As soon as she opened it, I darted inside. There's something weird about Kayleigh. Isabel scoffed. Yeah. Duh. What? She's weird. Always has been. You just noticing this now. I frowned at her. Okay, sorry, that came out really mean. But it's true, she's just weird. I wish she wouldn't come over every weekend. But since you're really good about Ben coming over, I never say anything. She doesn't come over every weekend, I huffed. It's been a lot. I mean, she was here homecoming weekend, then those 2 weekends in October, then Halloween. She wasn't here Halloween, I protested. Oh yes, she was, Isabel replied. Ben and I had to go over to his place, because she was here with you. I shook my head. No, she wasn't here Halloween. We stared at each other. Isabel's irritation melted to confusion. She wasn't here. I had COVID, remember? But I saw her. When we came back from the Beta Theta Pi party, she was here. We had to go to Ben's place. The room started to tilt around me. I remember being so sick that weekend, in and out of sleep half the day. But she was here, without me knowing. You must have gotten the weekends confused, I said weakly. No, I remember it clearly, because we were both in our costumes. Do you know how itchy that Harley Quinn wig is? Kaylee must have let herself in, but why? Now that I thought about it, that weekend, there had been some weird stuff. I'd chalked it up to delirium at the time, but I remember not being able to find my phone. My milk was missing from the fridge. I thought it'd been Isabel or Ben, but it had been Kaylee. She was here, watching me sleep. What the fuck? I was jolted out of my thoughts by a thump outside, coming from the common room. Kaylee, I whispered. The footsteps, slow and deliberate, started down the hall. My door creaked open. She's looking for me. I ran over to the door and locked it. I held a finger to my lips, standing absolutely still, so still I could hear the blood pulsing in my ears. The footsteps started back up into the common room and then towards our door, getting louder. Isabel glanced down, and her eyes went wide. She's right there, Isabel mouthed to me. The footsteps stopped. The door handle made a ratcheting sound as Kaylee tried to turn it. Once, twice, 3 times. Haley, are you in there? I held my breath. Isabel. I closed my eyes. She'll just go away.
And she'll think Isabel's asleep and I just stepped out.
Isabel's computer is on, but it's dark in here. So, we're fine. I took in a slow, quiet breath. We're fine. She's just going to go back to sleep. 1, 2, 3, 4. I know you're in there. A raspy whisper, unlike anything I'd heard Kaylee say, and it was coming from the crack under the door. I could feel her breath against my ankles. Isabel clapped a hand over her mouth. I took a shaking step away from the door. Let me in, she whispered. Her slim, pale fingers shot through the crack under the door and swept back and forth, quickly, frantically, trying to grab any part of us she could. Let me in now. Isabel grabbed her phone off the desk and dialed 911. The fingers retracted, and footsteps sounded in the common room. By the time the police got here, Kaylee was gone. It's been 2 days, and I haven't heard from Kaylee. I think about her every waking minute. I've barely eaten or slept. I keep replaying that night through my head, wondering what she would done if I hadn't locked the door. I've done my research, though, combed through social media and photo albums and everything. There is no physical evidence that Kaylee existed in my life before a year ago. Because those photos from my childhood, my mom insists I never had a friend named Kaylee. When she dug the old photo albums out of the attic, she wasn't in any of them. Kaylee's face only appeared in the digital scans of the photos I'd posted online. Photos ID posted in the past year. And those 21 mutual friends, they all met her in the past year too. She'd made an effort to befriend my friends, find them online, but none of the friendships went back more than a year. I'd checked each and every one. And now, suddenly, I'm having trouble recalling all those memories with her. I can barely remember what she looked like. Blonde hair, pale skin, dimples. I knew that much, but if you showed me a lineup of 10 girls with those qualities, I don't think I'd be able to pick her out. Which leads me to the horrifying conclusion. If she ever finds me again, whether that's in days or years or decades, I won't even know it's her. I found an open Toys R Us. If you're a 90s kid like me, you have fond memories of Toys R Us. It was basically a child's heaven, an entire store the size of Walmart, but only with toys. Infinite rows of Pokemon cards, Lisa Frank, Game Boys, Super Soakers, Tamagotchis, everything. Every time my sister and I went, it would be an exercise in manipulation. How much could we persuade our parents to buy for us? Because if they'd let us, we'd buy out the whole store. When I heard that Toys R Us went bankrupt, I found myself sadly nostalgic. One by one, the stores disappeared. The ones around where I live met the same fate as the Kmarts before them. They became abandoned concrete structures, surrounded by an empty parking lot filled with potholes. And like the Kmarts, it seemed like they could never find a store the right size or style to lease the space. I saw a Spirit Halloween in one once, but it stood empty for years before eventually getting torn down. But then my sister Jess and I went on a road trip together to visit our sick mom. And during the drive, somewhere in the middle of Indiana, we found a Toys R Us that was open. I couldn't believe my eyes. We'd gotten lost trying to find our way back to the highway after stopping for fast food. We found ourselves in an empty parking lot, surrounded on two sides by a thick forest of pine trees. But in the center was a large building with the colorful letters Toys R Us. "Oh my gosh," Jess gasped. "I thought they all closed." But the store was clearly open. The lights shone brightly from inside, showing rows and rows of toys through the large windows. I slowed to a stop. "Can we go in?" I asked Jess, for old time's sake. "Let's do it." I pulled into a parking space, and the two of us approached. I had to admit, I was pretty excited. What is it about hitting your early 30s that seems to punch up the nostalgia in your brain? It's like some weird defense mechanism, like your brain knows it's not so young anymore, and it's desperately trying to cling to the past. Maybe we also yearn for a time before smartphones and social media, when the highest tech thing was a 3 LCD screen showing Pokemon. I don't know. By the time we reached the glass doors, my body was thrumming with excitement. For a second, I thought they might not open, but with a quiet whoosh, they did. We stepped inside, and for a second, we just stared. Colorful aisles of toys, as far as the eye could see. Paradise for a kid, a trip down memory lane for the rest of us. But then I took a closer look, and I realized there wasn't any Minecraft, or Paw Patrol, or newfangled stuff. There was a display for Pokemon, featuring Pikachu and the original 3 starters, not the weird-ass new ones nobody likes. There was a display of Super Soakers and Nerf guns, front and center. It felt like stepping back in time. And then it hit me. What was really going on here? Someone must have decided to snatch up a business opportunity. They weren't selling toys. They were selling nostalgia. Someone had opened up a store called Toys R Us, not caring about copyright infringement, and filled it with 90s and 00s toys. They must be packed when it isn't almost 10 o'clock at night. Wait, why was a toy store open at almost 10 at night? "Welcome to Toys R Us," a voice called out from behind me. I turned to see the store's only cashier, a woman in her late teens or early 20s, very pretty, with dark hair in a bun and strands falling around her face. She was wearing one of those choker necklaces that were so popular years ago, giving off a little bit of a goth vibe. "Hi," I called out, giving her a big grin. I was about to ask her if they had any Lisa Frank stuff. I loved that stuff as a kid, but Jess broke me from my thoughts. "Oh my gosh, they have Tamagotchis," she exclaimed, running over to one of the aisles. She picked up one of the keychains in her hand. "I always let them die. Maybe this is my chance to redeem myself." "You'll just let it die again," I laughed. "You can even keep your plants alive." She stuck her tongue out at me. I walked over to the Pokemon display, picking up a booster pack of cards. "This looks like one of the original ones. Don't these go for like $300? "Oh my gosh," Jess said. But the price tag just said $7.99. There were only 2 left, so Jess and I each grabbed one, and then we continued deeper into the store. "Do you remember when Mom went to every store like a madman, looking for a stuffed Vulpix?" I asked. "That was your favorite, and they were sold out everywhere, and she was tearing her hair out trying to find one." "I remember," Jess replied, as we walked down the aisle. "She really didn't have to do that. But you were so happy. I remember the grin on your face. You wouldn't let go of that thing for weeks." As we walked, the fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. The air was warm and damp. I could feel myself start to sweat. I found myself picking up the pace, walking faster towards the end of the aisle. Couldn't really tell you why. Just a feeling, I guess. "Do you want to get anything else?" Jess asked. "You'd love to snag one of those Lisa Frank notebooks. Honestly, with the unicorn on it." "What was his name?" "Charlie." She shrugged. "Lisa Frank was your thing, not mine." That was one thing I hated about being an adult. How you were expected to take the color out of everything in your life. And I don't mean that as a metaphor. Everyone wears beige and gray now. Houses are all white and black, sterile and desaturated. Why is it wrong for a 30-year-old woman to have a rainbow unicorn notebook? I mean, not for professional meetings. Sure, but at home. Society won't frown upon social media or porn or vaping, but they'll look at you differently the second they see your childish unicorn notebook. Fuck it. I was getting that notebook, and it would live on my desk proudly. We made it to the end of the aisle. I looked both ways. The back wall seemed to stretch forever in either direction. The store seemed a lot bigger now that we were inside of it. Which way? Jess shrugged. I have no idea. I glanced over the back wall. Boxes upon boxes of puzzles and games were stacked on each other, like Mousetrap and Chutes and Ladders. I glanced down the aisles, and then I saw a glimpse of the familiar rainbowy colors peeking out of an aisle several aisles down. Lisa Frank's over there, I said. But Jess was already walking in the opposite direction, towards a display of Furbies. A shudder went through me. I hated those things. He'll catch up with you in a second, I said, starting towards Lisa Frank. I speed-walked along the back wall, towards the colorful aisle that was calling to me like a chorus of angels. That old, childlike excitement swelled through me as I got close. I couldn't believe how excited I was. I'm a grown woman, damn it. But that's the power of nostalgia, I guess. When I got there, however, I stopped dead. There were notebooks and folders and plushies. All right. Except there was something horribly wrong with them. In front of me, there was a notebook featuring the familiar Lisa Frank yellow Labradors, but their eyes weren't brown. They were pure white, with just a single dot in each eye for the pupil, and their mouths were open to reveal multiple rows of razor-sharp teeth. And the unicorn notebook I so desired. Its rainbow horn was covered in bright red liquid, as if it had just gored someone. What the fuck? How are they selling this to children? I grabbed one of the rainbow leopard plushies off the shelves. One of its eyes was missing, replaced with a single white button. It reminded me of the mascots from Five Nights at Freddy's. Deteriorated, damaged, taken over by something else entirely. I ran out of the aisle and down the back wall again, calling for Jess. As I did, though, I saw the games more clearly. The Mousetrap game showed a real-life mouse getting decapitated as kids watched, their mouths open with laughter. There was a game called Stab Your Dad, which showed a hand being pierced by dozens of tiny little needles, and a variant of Operation, which showed a drawing of children cutting into a real corpse. I broke into a sprint and finally found Jess, holding a gray Furby. We've got to get out of here, I panted. I know. She held out the Furby to me, and now I heard its little voice, repeating the same 3 words over and over. Love, I'm watching you. I'm watching you. She tossed it back on the shelf, and the two of us hurried towards the exit, not breaking into a run in case that prompted the cashier or someone else to chase us. But as soon as we left the aisle, the air shifted. Something felt different. The air pressure, the temperature, the lighting. Noise bubbled in as though we'd just surfaced from underwater. What the hell? Sunlight streamed through the windows. The store was packed. Women in jeans and windbreakers chased after little kids toddling through the store. Laughter and squeals of delight filled the aisles. Jess turned to me, mouth hanging open. You can go back, if you'd like. I wheeled around to see the goth girl from earlier standing behind us, right behind us. What do you mean? She shrugged. Time isn't set in stone. You can go back to the way things were. At this distance, I realized she wasn't as young as I'd thought. Her makeup caked into fine lines around her eyes, and she had a few strands of silver hair poking out at her temples. Our age, or a little older, someone who was forged in the 90s like us. Before I could say anything else, Jess grabbed my arm. Look. I turned, and my jaw went slack. Our mother was entering the store, purple windbreaker, chin-length blonde hair in a neat bob, and in tow, a little girl with dark wavy hair, and another, even littler girl, with blonde hair like her mom. That's us, I whispered. We stared, paralyzed, as the child versions of us stopped at the Pokemon display. Our mom leaned over and told us something, and we giggled. This can't be real. So are you going to join them? The woman behind us asked. For a second, with every fiber of my being, I wanted to go, what I wouldn't give to be back there, 30 years ago, before everything happened, before the disasters of our time, before 9/11s, before COVID, before wars and genocides, before social media and smartphones and ads took over everything. I knew how horrible this world could be, before I realized life was less like a walk in the park and more like a climb up a mountain, blood, sweat, and tears. Before I knew evil, before I knew true pain, before I knew anything at all. And, most important of all, before Mom got sick. I stared into the Toys R Us, at the golden sunlight and the happy faces, and all I could think of was taking a step forward. Then Mom turned around, and I stopped dead in my tracks. Her face was all wrong. Her eyes were two empty sockets, two black pits, staring out at us. Her mouth was twisted in a horrible smile. It was only for the tiniest instant, but I saw it, clear as day. That's not Mom. When I turned around, however, I saw something far more terrifying. Jess was taking a step forward. No, I lurched forward and wrapped my arms around her waist that pulled her back. We both stumbled, nearly losing our balance. Jess was crying, clawing at my arms. I need to go, she whimpered. I need to see Mom. When I pulled her to her feet, holding her back with all my strength, everyone in the store was looking at us. Each and every one had those horrible empty eye sockets. Run, I shouted. We turned around, pushing past the goth woman, sprinting down the aisle. My lungs burned, but I kept pushing forward. We turned the corner at the back wall and kept running. I don't know exactly how long we ran for, but somehow we found ourselves at the front of the store again. It had reverted back to normal. We ran through the glass doors and burst into the parking lot, taking in lungfuls of the cool night air. Then we leapt into the car and peeled away. Jess could barely form words. Neither could I. You saw it all, right? She asked. Finally. Mom? Us? Yeah, I replied. And then we both heard a crinkling sound from within the car. Jess scowled. She reached back and pulled something out of her butt pocket. Oh no, she muttered. I accidentally took that booster pack of Pokemon cards with us. I must have put it in my pocket when I was looking at the Furbies or something. Throw it out the window, I said. What? You don't want those things coming back and looking for it. Throw it out the window. But it's like $300. It's not messed up like the other toys. I think it's actually an original pack. Throw it out the window. Okay, Jess said. She rolled down the window and let the pack of cards flutter out into the breeze. Then we continued driving towards our mom's house, slightly less afraid of what was to come. That's it for tonight's stories, but the nightmares never end. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a new upload. Got a scary experience of your own? Share it in the comments. I just might feature it in a future video. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, some things are scarier than they seem in the dark.